Chapter 652. Hearing this, Huang Guanzi was not in a hurry to answer. He smiled, took a roasted fish and handed it to Lord Donghai, but did not let go. Lord Donghai reached out to take it. With just a glance, he tore off a piece of fish with his teeth. After chewing for a while, he swallowed. I've said it before. It's nothing. There are no taboos like other places. After tasting it again, he frowned slightly. Good taste. You only use salt to taste it? Huang Guanzi twirled his beard. It's all about the heat. The fish is tender, and the meat with fine scales is even more tender. This kind of ingredient is fresh and tender. Ordinary methods may waste natural resources, so I use the true fire of the painting path to cook it. The rootless fire of the painting path is not like ordinary firewood. Although there is no special aroma, it does not affect the natural fragrance of the fish. It is 3 times hotter than ordinary fire. Once the fish comes into contact with the fire, the skin will be charred first. The juice at the bottom will be locked into the meat, unable to escape. Turn to a gentle fire, roast the fish inside to medium well, and sprinkle salt to prevent the water from coming out. When eating, there will be both the charred outside and the tender inside, naturally delicious. Saying this, he also took a tail and ate it. Tasting it carefully, he said, Lord is right. This is the method of the painting path. Since Lord asked this, I guess, today the people from Southern Wood House will arrive. Lord Donghai twirled the bamboo branch and looked at him. Yes. But he did not say anything else. Huang Guanzi smiled again, as I expected. With so many things happening in the Eastern Sea, how could Southern Wood House, which has always been competing with us, not make a move? Let me guess, the owner of Southern Wood House is about to arrive, right? Lord Donghai tore the fish with his hands, piece by piece steaming hot. Hearing this, he grunted again. What do you think, teacher? In my opinion, Lord probably does not believe that person's words. But he is still somewhat unhappy, so he came here to find peace of mind. Huang Guanzi laughed. Then I will give Lord peace of mind. The person should be using Southern Wood House's owner as a bargaining chip. He claimed that if Jun Shang cooperated with him, he would not spread the news. But in fact, no matter what, this news will be released. If he is really from Southern Wood House and is pretending to be our emissary. Lord, don't kill him for now. Tonight, I will confront him personally. Do you still want it? Lord Donghai froze for a moment and realized that he was asking about the fish. The fish was small, and the great demon only picked the tender meat to eat. In the time it took for Huang Guanzi to say these few words, he had unknowingly finished eating both sides of the plump side. Only then did he let out an ah, and waved his hand to decline. Sir, please use it. He stood up again. Since that's the case, I won't disturb Mr.'s interest any longer. See you tonight. Huang Guanzi did not get up. He only nodded slightly. Thus, the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea left, and the courtyard returned to silence. The rootless fire burned faintly. Huang Guanzi slowly ate the one in his hand. He ate very carefully, not letting go of a single bit of tender meat. After eating one, he seemed to want more, but he didn't eat any more. He took the remaining one from the fire, poked it with his finger, popped a hole in the fire pit, and threw the fish into it. Then he took the one that Lord Donghai left on the table, threw it into the hole and buried it. After doing all this, he stood up and walked to the bamboo fence of the courtyard with his hands behind his back. By this time the sky was getting dark. From this fence, one could see the sea through the sparse thin bamboo. The sky above the sea appeared a dim yellow, and the sunset was burning brightly. He looked for a while and sighed softly. Sigh. When the sunset was also burned out and the bright moon appeared on the horizon, Huang Guanzi turned around. He began to walk in the courtyard, and each step was of different priority. It looked like the steps of you of the Xianmen, but inside it was completely different. The cultivators of the Xianmen could not see the trick in it, and the demons could not see it either. But those who knew about painting should be able to see some clues. He was painting with steps. It was just like what Li Yunxin did when she first saw the caravan of the Chao escort agency and was captured by the swordsman in the forest. She performed her painting skills in a very secretive way in order to obtain some kind of magical power. This went on for a quarter of an hour. Huang Guanzi stopped. He stood still for a while, then said as if he was talking to himself, She's here. A while later, it won't be long. Lord Donghai doesn't look smart, but he's actually very cautious. I look like I can see everything here, but there are actually a lot of restrictions. I'm taking a risk now. So he was talking to someone. Her purpose in coming to the East Sea is unknown, but she should be here to help Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin. He stopped and listened for a while. His purpose is also unknown. But from what happened in the past, he probably just wants to live. The situation forced him to go against the current. At first he wanted to look for Shinryu as a backer. But he found out that this backer is unreliable, and now he's planning to save himself. He doesn't care about our matter. What did the other side say? It seemed like they said a lot. But Huang Guanzi's face was as calm as still water. He listened and said, "He can be used." "Yes. I'm thinking about it now and I'm doing it too." It should be a coincidence. These days he and I are doing the same thing. For the past year I've been trying to provoke Lord Donghai and the other dragon's son to fight. But he always hesitated. Now that Li Yunxin is here, we can be considered to be combining strength and softness. He's not as polite to Lord Donghai as I am, and now this water demon is almost obedient to me. The other side spoke. It didn't say much, probably only 3 or 4 sentences. Huang Guanzi's face finally showed some expression and he frowned slightly. Is this appropriate? He's not a quiet person. If he survives this time and grows stronger, I'm afraid no one will be able to control him anymore. After a while, he sighed helplessly. There's something that I shouldn't have said. But, don't bite off more than you can chew. This time the other side spoke even less, only 1 sentence. Huang Guanzi shook his head and turned around. With his hands behind his back, he wiped the ground with his feet as if to erase some traces, and also as if he was thinking about something while wiping. Then he sat on the stone bench in the courtyard, closed his eyes and breathed in and out. Cultivator's breaths were extremely long. His cultivation should be considered profound, so it was even longer. 1 breath for nearly a quarter of an hour. After 10 breaths, footsteps came from outside the courtyard. Huang Guanzi opened his eyes and saw the officer next to Lord Donghai holding a white paper lantern, squinting at him and smiling. "Sir. His Majesty ordered that you should interrogate the spy caught in the afternoon. This general will accompany you." Huang Guanzi opened his eyes and a light flashed. "Ah, this general?" The officer laughed. "His Majesty said that when the sea surface is pacified, he will call me General Fubo." Huang Guanzi also laughed. "What else did His Majesty say?" The officer made a gesture of invitation. "Only the matter at hand. Sir, that spy is bold. He dared to say that sir is a fake. TSK. I think he is just a mortal. How dare he claim to be an emissary of the Freemasonry?" As he rambled on, he guided Huang Guanzi away. When the two met Wu Jiasong, who claimed to be an emissary of the Freemasonry, the latter had changed beyond recognition. He should have been tortured. There were no wounds on his body and there was no blood. However, his skin had turned blue and purple like a ripe plum. His skin was swollen as if juice or pus could flow out if a needle was poked. His skin was swollen as if juice or pus could flow out with a needle. Except for the stairs extending down from the wall on the side of the entrance, it was all seawater. Half of Wu Jiasong's body was soaked in seawater, like a pickled radish. The officer lifted the lantern, shone it at the entrance and said proudly, "The thief boasted shamelessly, I have taught him a lesson on behalf of sir. Now sir can ask, I will hold the line for sir." In the afternoon, Huang Guanzi told Lord Donghai that the two of them could confront each other. It seemed that the two of them were really called to confront, now. The officer claimed that he had already taught Huang Guanzi a lesson, and was afraid that he had tortured Huang Guanzi to interrogate him. But this kind of thing was also expected, so Huang Guanzi did not take it to heart. He nodded slightly and walked down the wet stone steps to see Wu Jiasong. This visitor who claimed to be an emissary must not have expected that he would end up like this. It had only been 6 hours since he arrived on the island. Not only did he not become a guest of honor, but he was also locked in the water dungeon. How could a mortal withstand the torture methods of a demon? If it were not for the fact that there were mortals on the island before, he would have died long ago. Now his arms were hung on the wall, and his head hung down powerlessly. But the pair of eyes on his blue and purple face were bright, like 2 stars in the dark prison. Seeing Huang Guanzi walking down the stone steps, he stared at him and squeezed out a hoarse voice from his throat. "Hee hee. You are that Freemasonry emissary? You think you are the emissary of the Freemasonry?" Huang Guanzi looked at him calmly for a while and sighed. He looked up at the officer and said, "General, you are too heavy-handed. I am afraid that this person has lost his mind from the pain." After saying this, he lifted his foot and walked over. Wherever he passed, the water ripples seemed to be ironed out, becoming like the surface of a mirror. He walked 6 steps to Wu Jiasong's side and pointed at the wall. The shackles and chains were unlocked, and the man's body fell down. Huang Guanzi reached out to hold him, and then made a gesture in the void and 2 yellow scarf warriors appeared. The two warriors carried a small litter. Huang Guanzi placed Wu Jiasong on it, then took a step back and sighed, "You are just a mortal. To be able to endure such methods and still call yourself the emissary of the Freemasonry, you are really unyielding." Never mind. Seeing that you have the guts, let me ask you. If you are really a member of my society but you came here on your own, because of our brotherhood in the same boat, I will definitely ensure that you leave the East Sea safely. If you are not, but someone from Southernwood House, I will also give you a quick death. As soon as he said this, Wu Jiasong forced himself to stand up and laughed coldly. Hee hee. The method you used just now, is it painting? The people from Southernwood House call themselves the old subordinates of the painting saint. Do you think I don't know? Huang Guanzi smiled. While leading the two yellow scarf warriors to follow him, he said, "Brother, if you are really a member of my society, this method can't prove your innocence. Do you know Xian Shilio?" Wu Jiasong stared at him, wanting to say something but hesitating. It seemed that he knew, but he was worried that the other party was bluffing, so he kept his mouth shut. Huang Guanzi didn't care. He continued, "Xian Shilio is a member of my society. If you are really the person you said, you should know. Doesn't she have any methods of painting? Since Southernwood House calls itself the old subordinates of the painting saint, we should learn this skill. Let me ask you, since you said you are the emissary of the Freemasonry, which elder are you from?" When he said this, he had already walked up the stairs. The junior colonel originally thought that he was going to interrogate him, but when he saw him bring the person out, he was at a loss for a moment. Huang Guanzi also smiled at him. "Go and report to the Lord of the East Sea. Tell him that I have a way to tell the truth. Tomorrow morning, send this person to the palace in one piece and let the Lord deal with him." The junior colonel was stunned and said embarrassedly, "But the Lord ordered." Huang Guanzi smiled and sighed, "All right. Did Juanshang order you to watch over him closely, afraid that this person will suddenly attack and harm me?" The junior colonel nodded hurriedly, "Yes." After saying this, he realized that it was stupid and smiled embarrassedly. But Huang Guanzi didn't care. "Then follow him. This friend, I asked you which elder are you from, why don't you say anything?" The two yellow scarf warriors carried Wu Jiasong as if he was walking on flat ground without any bumps. But when Wu Jiasong was being tortured in the water, he still had some strength. Now that he was on the ground, he seemed to be more comfortable, but he seemed to be weaker. After a long time, he said, "Don't try to get information from me." Huang Guanzi laughed again. He didn't look like he was interrogating a criminal at all. "This is a good excuse. If you can't answer anything, just say that you're worried that I'm trying to get information from you and don't mention it. But have you forgotten your situation? Right now it's not you interrogating me, but I'm interrogating you. You claim to be my emissary, so you have to show me something that can convince me. My Freemasonry used to have hundreds of elders and dozens of apostles, and countless connections in the human world. A few days ago there was a big change and many connections were broken. Even if I wanted to investigate your background, it would be difficult. If you continue with this attitude." When he said this, he was already out of the water prison. He turned to look at Wu Jiasong. "I can't protect you even if I wanted to. Think carefully, which elder are you from and who are you working for now? If you can't answer, you'll die in the hall tomorrow." Wu Jiasong stared at him. But this time he didn't seem angry but confused. "You," he said hesitantly, are you really one of my people? Say a name. Then you'll know whether I am or not." While the two of them were talking, the junior colonel was listening on the side. He didn't rush him and he wasn't in a hurry. He seemed to have memorized every word and every expression on his face. He stared at Wu Jiasong as if he wanted to see the words coming out of his mouth. After about 3 breaths, Wu Jiasong finally gritted his teeth. "Daoist Mulian." Huang Guanzi smiled. "That's him. Daoist Mulian is from Bingshu Grotto Heaven. He has 3 disciples. 2 of them are members of my people and 1 doesn't know anything. I've never heard of him being involved in the secular world." Wu Jiasong widened his eyes. Daoist Mulian's first disciple, great immortal Fanhua, was the one who introduced me into the society. Daoist Mulian is my ancestor. Are you really one of my people? Chapter 653. Huang Guanzi turned around and continued walking. Outside the water prison was a square paved with blue stones. It shone with a cold light under the moonlight. There were patrolling armored soldiers and sparks of fire around it. From here they could see the mountains of Penglai Island in the distance. There were buildings at the top of the mountains and they were brightly lit. It was as if the mountain was a torch that illuminated half the sky. At the center, on the tallest main peak, Lord Donghai's palace was even more dazzling. It was as if it was built in the sky. Huang Guanzi pointed at the dazzling palace as he walked. He did not answer Wu Jiasong's question directly. Look at the palaces on the mountain. They are brilliant. The demons at the foot of the mountain look at them in the darkness. They can't see them clearly. They think that the person in the palace is the king, an amazing person. But from here there are differences between palaces. How can Lord Donghai's residence be compared to the guards on other mountains? When he said this, he glanced at Wu Jiasong. The lowest level of my organization are the mortals of the world. The peddlers among the mortals are the lowest of the lowest. Many people don't know who they work for, but these people are the safest. Since they don't know, at most they will be abandoned at any time. They won't die. Above these people are their leaders. For example, the leaders of gangs and small sections. These leaders know who their superiors are. But their superiors are the people of the secular world, the big families and gangs in the secular world. These great clans and gangs will also be connected to the government. At this level, they are already close to the peak of the secular organizations. Since you know Taoist Mulian, you should be at this level. But these are like the mountains in front of us. They are all in the darkness at the foot of the mountain. Above them are people like great immortal Fanhua. Cultivators are immortals in the eyes of the secular world, but they are just the lowest level of the cultivation world. They know that they work for the Freemasons and know who their superiors are. Taoist Mulian is just someone in charge of some affairs in one of the sects in the celestial sect. You will tell them important news. Usually they don't know many details. Above them are the sect leaders of the sects and the sect masters of the grotto heavens. These people knew the big and small matters of the guild, but not everyone had the right to make decisions. The decision-making power was ultimately in the hands of the two saints and a few core members. However, the important decisions they make will still be submitted to the previous elders for review. That is only in rough outline. However, there were already 8 levels. You are between the 3rd and 4th level of these 8 levels. It was like a governor of a prefecture or a province in the imperial court of the secular world. Why do you think you know the movements of the higher-ups and what the prime minister and emperor are doing? Huang Guanzi sighed in a low voice. Maybe you've been in the secular world for too long. You only feel that the higher you go, it's all hazy and blurry and your heart can't understand it. You only think that what you see is the big picture, but you don't know that your big picture is really insignificant. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a putong sound. Turning his head to look, he saw Wu Jiasong tumbling down from the palanquin. He was now swollen like a ball, but his movements were nimble. As soon as he landed on the ground, he knelt down. Are you really a member of my guild? Then you are. Huang Guanzi smiled. Just now, I said it was a rough introduction. So, before I came to the Eastern Sea, my level was slightly higher than Taoist Mulian's. I can be considered to be in the 6th level. He could actually explain the composition of the Freemasons so clearly, so naturally, it was very convincing. In addition, although his appearance was wretched, his bearing was outstanding. At this moment, Wu Jiasong seemed to have already believed 80% of it. He did not get up but still forced himself to say, "May I ask, who are you?" Huang Guanzi turned his face to the junior colonel and smiled. He pointed at the person on the ground. "Look, you have to see the real deal to believe me. When I first came to Penglai you were also like this." The junior colonel smiled apologetically. "Haha, but true gold fears no fire, sir." Huang Guanzi looked at Wu Jiasong and said in a deep voice, "I used to reside in the universal Mi Luo grotto heaven of the 18 paradises of Daotong. I was one of the 6 managing elders under the sect master, and my Taoist name was Huang Guanzi. If you were lucky enough to cultivate in the Taoist sect, you should know my name." Wu Jiasong was stunned. "I don't know. What I don't know, is there anything else?" The junior colonel seemed to be angry at this moment. He shouted sternly, "How dare you? Sir has already said so much about you, a fish and shrimp in the swamp, and you still dare to ask. Is this something you can ask?" Huang Guanzi waved his hand. "It's okay. Being bold but careful is also the style of the members of our Freemasons. Well, you naturally have no chance to know about the things in the Taoist sect. However, if you are experienced and knowledgeable, you should have heard of the things in the secular world. Let me ask you, since you are born in Donghai country, have you heard of a Taoist priest in Donghai country more than 400 years ago, whose Taoist name was Huang Guanzi? Do you know that there is a god in the secular world called the virtuous Lord of Heaven?" Wu Jiasong blinked his eyes and said hesitantly, "This? I know. When I was a child, there was a memorial tablet of the virtuous Lord at home." Huang Guanzi, The one in the era of Emperor Minhao. Speaking of this, his eyes suddenly widened. Ah? Huang Guanzi smiled and didn't speak. The junior colonel also smiled. Huang Guanzi was not a rare name, and could even be counted as a common name. If all the wild Taoist priests named Huang Guanzi in Midland were gathered together, they could probably form an army. However, for people in Donghai country and the surrounding areas, the first name that came to their minds was a Taoist priest who lived in the era of Emperor Minhao of Donghai country over 400 years ago. It was said that the Taoist priest was ugly but he was powerful. When he traveled around the world, he arrived in Donghai country, and a sea monster was stirring up waves and devouring passing ships. The Taoist priest, Huang Guanzi, raised his Big Dipper sword and fought against the monster and finally killed the monster. However, the Taoist priest was injured badly, and soon after he was taken back to the capital of Donghai country, he ascended to heaven. However, on the day of his ascension, a god walked down from the clouds and took the Taoist priest away. It was said that Huang Guanzi's righteous deeds had touched the heaven, and the god guided him and turned him into a god. At that time the emperor of Donghai country, Emperor Minhao, thought that this was an auspicious sign. Therefore he built a temple in the place where the Taoist priest was taken away, and gave him the title of the Incarnation of the Virtuous Lord of Heaven. It was said that even now, the statue in the Temple of the Virtuous Lord was made according to Huang Guanzi's real appearance 400 years ago. Wu Jiasong used to live in the capital, so he had surely been to the Temple of the Virtuous Lord and worshipped the statue in the temple. Now that he heard Huang Guanzi mention it, he took a closer look at him. Isn't he the same as the statue in the temple? Seeing the god, who was worshipped by his family when he was young, standing right in front of him, how could he not be shocked? While he was shocked, the junior colonel snorted coldly and said, "You mortal, you are so blind. The sea monster that our Mr. killed by the East Sea 400 years ago was a traitor who was trying to escape to the shore from our East Sea. After our Mr. came, everything matched up, so you don't even have the chance to doubt him. Humph, you don't know what's good for you, you don't know a god." Wu Jiasong finally kowtowed, and a drop of purple blood came out of his forehead. "Your Highness, Lord of Heaven, forgive me." Huang Guanzi smiled and said, "There's no need for Lord of Heaven. It's just a rumor spread by ignorant people. Most of the powerful people in the Shenmen live in seclusion, and only those with shallow cultivation can travel the world." In the end, such a group of people became the Lord of Heaven, old ancestor and great god in the world. No one knows about the real powerful people. Let's not talk about it. The junior colonel hurriedly said, "Mister, you are too modest." Huang Guanzi restrained his smile and changed the topic, staring at Wu Jiasong. "But now, you know that I am indeed a member of the Freemasonry. But I don't know whether you are or not. Now it's time for me to ask you." Wu Jiasong was originally extremely weak. The reason why he held on was probably to expose the true face of the spy. But just now, not only did he know that he was a member of the Freemasonry, but he also discovered that it was the god he had been worshipping since he was young. His mood was agitated and his body was about to collapse. But now that he heard Huang Guanzi say this, his whole body was lifted up again. But even though his spirit was lifted up, his body couldn't take it. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately spat out a mouthful of black blood. Huang Guanzi didn't care about him. Instead, he restrained his smile and said in a deep voice, "Tell me in detail how you sneaked into the Southernwood residence, how you found out about this place, and what you did from start to end. I know in my heart." At this time, his tone sounded like he was really here to interrogate him. Wu Jiasong spat out another mouthful of black blood. But he also knew that these two people in front of him were not really amiable people. No matter how amiable they seemed before, it could only be regarded as a means and a strategy. Although his consciousness was heavy and his vision was black, he had to say it. When a person was awake, they spoke in an orderly manner. But when their consciousness was muddled, what they thought and what they said were completely different. Before this, he had been tortured, used all kinds of means and even injected with poison. Just now, he was shocked and overjoyed by Huang Guanzi's words, and the poison became even stronger. At first, he still knew what he was talking about. But after talking for a while, he felt like he was drunk. He only felt that Huang Guanzi and the junior colonel's bodies were far and near, and the lights around him were flickering. So some of the details that he remembered, but when it came out of his mouth, it was a different matter. Some of the things that he knew, but he thought that he was asking the emissary of his own society, so he just brushed it off. As he spoke, Huang Guanzi asked him questions. Often he would ask the same question 3 or 4 times, or suddenly interrupt his train of thought and ask him to say something he had said before. He listened to everything in his heart, but his consciousness became more and more blurry. Gradually he became like a half-awake person. He felt that he had said and answered all the questions, but in fact he hadn't. This went on for about the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn before Huang Guanzi finally stopped asking. Wu Jiasong felt that the whole world had become quiet, and his heart was also relieved. But as soon as he let out a breath, he heard Huang Guanzi's tone suddenly become stern. He shouted 3 questions in a row. Every word was like thunder exploding in his heart. He was so shocked that his vision darkened. Even the expression on his face couldn't make up his own mind. There was only confusion left. Huang Guanzi shouted, "First, you said that you met Taoist Mulian in the 9th year of Xingyu, and then you said that you helped the society with the matter of Clear Lake in the 7th year of Xingyu. Which one came first?" "I asked you how many times the people from the 13 provinces of Qi contacted you. You said that you only remembered 3 times. Do you know that we don't have a headquarters in Qi? You also said that you were in charge of Mount Qishan of the Freemasonry. But the position of the leader of my society was abolished 4 years ago. Where are you from?" Wu Jiasong knew the answer to all 3 questions in his heart. He didn't answer wrong in the 9th year of Xingyu and the 7th year of Xingyu. It was Huang Guanzi who asked the wrong questions. He mentioned what happened in the past 2 years, but it was only a matter of time. But Huang Guanzi heard it in his heart and shouted at him when he was talking about other things in a daze. At first he didn't pay attention. Later he heard it and thought that this senior made a mistake, so he didn't dare to correct him. How could he know that he was now the one to blame? The headquarters of the 13 provinces of Qi. Of course the Freemasonry had a headquarters in Qi. Mount Qishan. Before he snuck into Southern Wood Lodge, he was the Mount Qishan's Mount Qishan. And this position hadn't been abolished. It was still there. These 3 questions made him indescribably shocked. And because his head was dizzy, he pretended to be dumbfounded. After being stunned for more than 10 breaths, he realized that Huang Guanzi did it on purpose. He was framing him. Everything was a trap. From the moment he saw him, it was a trap. He pretended to be kind and friendly so that he would let his guard down. But he hated himself for being so stupid. He really admitted that he was the senior of the Freemasonry in front of the junior. Then this senior changed the topic and framed him. That junior believed him, and after he confirmed it, he believed him even more. And now, shock, fear and anger surged in his heart. Wu Jiasong wanted to widen his eyes, but his face wouldn't listen to him. Instead, because his muscles were pulled, he looked even more dazed and terrified. He called out, "You," but a warm current gushed out from his chest again, blocking his words. Wu Jiasong spat out another mouthful of black blood. He knew that there was no turning back now. He had come here to accomplish something, and he had also successfully deceived Li Yunxin on the East Sea. Who knew that he would meet someone even more difficult to deal with here? In the end, he couldn't overcome this hurdle. He steeled his heart and pounced towards Huang Guanzi. But he felt a chill in his chest. The last thing he saw was half of his body falling to the ground. The junior retracted his hand. The big saber transformed back into a palm. He looked at Wu Jiasong's corpse with disdain, then looked at the terrified expression on his face. He spat, "Pay." In the end, he couldn't escape Master's discerning eyes. We didn't get anything out of him for several hours, but Master's trick revealed his true colors. Huang Guanzi smiled and shook his head. "What's true can't be fake and what's fake can't be real. But I killed him here." The junior laughed. "How could I really use this kind of thing to confront Master? Isn't that an insult?" Jun Shang had already ordered. After Master asked, he directly took care of it. On this Penglai Island, there is no one who doesn't trust Master. Huang Guanzi laughed. "I'm relieved that Jun Shang treats me like this. Let's go, you and I will wash our hands and get rid of the foul smell." Chapter 654. The 2 of them did wash their hands. It was the same rule as on land. In this kind of death prison, people who were kidnapped or killed should all be washed, to avoid bad luck. But then they didn't drink like the people on land. They both knew that they had their own errands to do. After saying goodbye to Huang Guanzi, Xiao Zhang went straight to the most splendid palace in the mountains. About an hour later, he appeared in front of Donghai King. He met him in his own bedroom. The walls of the palace were inlaid with fist-sized luminous pearls for illumination, so this palace formed a sharp contrast with the dark and spacious main hall. Donghai King's appearance was also very different from when he was in the meeting. He didn't wear a dignified robe, nor did he comb his hair neatly. Instead, he wore a black satin robe, which shone like water ripples as he moved. His hair was also loose, not even tied up. He looked dejected and carefree at the same time. When Xiao Zhang saw him, Donghai King was sitting on a wide chair, eating fruits and drinking wine from the land. He seemed to be a little drunk, squinting at him. How was it? Xiao Zhang bowed and told him what Huang Guanzi had done just now. Donghai King listened quietly. While listening, he drank another pot of wine. Then he took a long breath and slowly stood up. Holding a grape in his hand, he walked slowly on the soft red carpet with his bare feet. Every 3 steps he would slightly raise his head and eat one. After eating all 5 of them, he threw the stalk away and wiped his hands on his sleeves. You said that when Huang Guanzi met him, he was not in a hurry to ask. Instead, he gave him a lot of time to speak slowly. Later, the two matched and proved that Huang Guanzi was indeed a member of the Freemasonry. Xiao Zhang bowed. Yes. Teacher was not in a hurry. Later, when it was teacher's turn to ask that man, he panicked. His words were incoherent and full of flaws. In the end, teacher asked him 3 contradictory questions. That man couldn't answer. He knew that the situation was hopeless, so he suddenly attacked. According to my lord's orders, if I find out that this person is fake and useless, I will kill him. I will later compile the information I obtained from him into a book and present it to my lord. Lord Donghai uttered a faint and sighed softly. All right. Sir's identity was real. This is a good thing. Then we can do as he says. After saying this, he looked at the lieutenant colonel. You're a clever man. It was a pity that his cultivation was too shallow. He had attained the Tao for more than 500 years, and his cultivation level was also low. However, he had a good heart and a bright mind. Alas, this monarch also wants to promote you to the rank of general. But I'm afraid the old fellows won't be convinced. The young superintendent hurriedly prostrated himself on the ground, not daring to speak. Lord Donghai thought for a while and looked at him with bright eyes. But there is one thing that needs a capable, bold and careful person to do. But it was very dangerous and he might not be able to return. These days I've been thinking about who to invite, and after much thought, I could only think of you. There's a saying on the continent, seeking riches amidst danger. You, the young superintendent immediately shouted, Your Majesty, I'll do anything. Lord Donghai smiled. I promised you before that I would call you General Fubo after you pacified the sea. It's also because you're capable. You don't have to rush to agree to this matter. Let me tell you. Even if you don't want to go, General Fubo will still be yours. But if you're willing to go and you succeed, you won't be an inferior general when you come back. The position of left general will be given to you, and those old fellows won't say anything. The young superintendent was really stunned when he heard this. In the military system of Donghai, there were 3 levels of generals. The next level were those inferior generals. General Fubo, General Jinlang, and General Baihua, all belonged to this level. The middle level was not permanent. Instead, it was temporarily conferred when there was a war or a need. For example, General of Northern Expedition, General of Southern Expedition, General of Suppressing Rebellion, and so on. There were only 3 of them who were 1 level higher. The first was the General-in-Chief, followed by the General of the Left and the General of the Right. Now he actually said that he would be called the General of the Left after the mission was completed. Even though the young superintendent was eager to make a contribution, he still shuddered. At present, there was only 1 general in the upper level on Penglai Island. It was the General-in-Chief of Donghai that Lord Donghai was also in charge of. What task was it? Was he going to go up to the sky and pick the moon? Seeing his expression, Lord Donghai said in a deep voice, You know what plan Master has set for us. He asked us to join forces with the Dragon King on the sea to attack Li Yunxin. Then he will kill the rest of them one by one, and we will subdue these forces one by one. Now that Li Yunxin has the approval of the Divine Lord, and with our cooperation we may be able to achieve this. However, on our side it's easy to say but difficult to do. Li Yunxin said that he is pretending to agree to the Divine Lord, and that he will eventually fall to our side. But how can we believe this kind of thing so easily? If we are the ones he wants to sacrifice, there will be a big battle in the end. Therefore there is such a task, send someone to his side. When the remaining 7 Dragon King are killed, he will be responsible for communicating with Donghai. At the same time he will observe his methods. When the matter is done and they turn against each other, this person will understand his methods and will be of great use. When everything is settled, this person will be credited with the most credit. Who can say anything about rewarding a general of the left? That's what I want to ask you. The little colonel prostrated on the ground, silent for a long time, and then gasped. Previously he was thinking about going up to the sky to pick the moon. Now that he knew about this, he realized that the difficulty was probably not any lower than going up to the sky to pick the moon. That way River Dragon King Li Yunxin was such a ferocious person. A few days ago, the demon generals under his command had devoured many of the soldiers of Donghai. This was not a common thing even among the demons in the sea. But today, according to Lord Donghai, because General Shifang's words had angered him, he killed his way into the army, sliced General Shifang alive, and ate his flesh. He even hung the half-eaten corpse on the sea as a warning to the public. It was hard to say whether he would accept being sent to the side of such a demon. Even if he accepted it, if he said something wrong, he would die. Even if he served him carefully, he had to kill the 7 dragon kings on the sea and the almost endless demon generals under the 7 dragon kings' command. He was a great demon in the mysterious realm, and he always had a way to save his life. But he was just a little colonel and his cultivation was low. It was like a little man drifting in the raging ocean for a few months. How could the chances be described as slim? However, even so he survived. When Lord Donghai and that demon turned against each other, how could he escape? How was this a slim chance of survival? It was clearly a slim chance of survival. Seeing that he had been silent for a long time, Lord Donghai smiled slightly. Go back and think about it. When you are done, come back and tell me. But as soon as he finished speaking, the little colonel bowed again and said in a deep voice, My lord, leave this matter to me. Lord Donghai took a few steps and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Oh? Don't you think that doing this is almost equivalent to death? The little colonel raised his head and said in a deep voice, I thought so just now. But then I thought, that Li Yunxin is not alone. General Shifang died a miserable death. But it also shows that he has a taboo in his heart. Where there is a taboo, there is a feeling. And it should be a very strong feeling. He also has a few demon generals, some powerful subordinates and even friends around him. If he is a cruel and crazy demon, these things will not happen. His temperament may be difficult to understand, but I think if I know his temper and his appetite, there will be a chance of survival. Besides, as my lord said, riches and honor come from danger. If not for such a great achievement, how could he be the left general? I hope my lord can fulfill my wish. Lord Donghai laughed loudly. You can see it so clearly, and you are the person I am looking for. I did not misjudge you. So, tomorrow morning I will invite all the sea envoys to Penglai for a discussion. You take my token to find Li Yunxin. From now on all the information will be in your hands. Let's start from now on. The little colonel said in a deep voice, Yes, my lord. When the tomorrow mentioned by Lord Donghai arrived, Li Yunxin was sitting on a reef watching the sunrise. A large island reef. Within a radius of a few hundred steps, it was straight up and down. It was as if a huge, thick stone pillar had been inserted directly into the sea. In fact, it was true. Li Yunxin had flattened the peaks of 16 islands before he found such a straight stone pillar. Then he used his supernatural power to insert this stone pillar straight into the sea, only revealing a height of about 200 feet. The reason why he made this seemed to be that he could see the motionless cube 1,000 meters away from him. He could see the appearance of that thing clearly, and he would not feel unhappy because of the corpse sealed in it. The reef was full of complex lines. This should be a means of painting. Li Yunxin was busy all night, and when the sky was about to break, he added the last stroke. Then he breathed a sigh of relief and jumped into the sea to take a bath. He encountered a few unlucky fish that bumped into him and he picked them up. He didn't need to cook fish. Yesterday, he sent away the pheasant, and then the 9th young master also ran away in panic because of Red Lady's presence. He didn't know that the army was coming. By the time he heard the shocking commotion and rushed back, everything was already over. Because he felt very guilty, he wanted to chase after the desperate enemy to prove that he was not a coward and avoided the battle. But the people had already retreated, so how could he chase after them? So he wanted to do something. When Li Yunxin caught the fish, the 2 demons took them away as if they were treasures, saying that they would make delicious food for him. It seemed that these demons, who could even swallow whales and dolphins, had to rely on Li Yunxin to catch fish. Li Yunxin sat on the rock, looking far to the east where the sun was getting brighter. At the intersection of the sea and the sky, a fish belly appeared first and then turned red. Then the sun rose and bathed everyone's faces in a warm red. He watched for a while, got up and walked on the reef again. The lines engraved on the stone were like complicated flowers and leaves. But this was only a layer of work. The big tactical formation, which was made up of nearly 100 densely packed magic circles, still needed to be carefully channeled spiritual chi and activated one by one before it could run completely. It was also not a day's work. A lot of spiritual chi was needed to activate the big tactical formation. If he killed tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of sea demons and sacrificed their souls, maybe he could succeed. What the pheasant practiced was the cultivation method passed down by Li Yunxin, so he could understand it a little. The ninth young master couldn't understand it, but he was also curious about what Li Yunxin was doing. But when he asked, Li Yunxin just smiled and said it was for fun. But who would spend so much effort to play? What was he playing? The two of them came back when it was getting dark last night. At that time, the stone pillar was already standing in the sea, and the tactical formation on it had not been engraved. However, at that time they could already see that something was wrong with Li Yunxin. He seemed to be injured. It was a new injury and it was in his divine soul. But as far as they knew, Li Yunxin hadn't been injured in the slightest when she'd captured General Shifang in the army. Later, he escaped unscathed under the protection of Red Lady. Therefore, the injury should not have been caused by the fight, but after Red Lady left, it was very strange. Then he saw him spend a whole night engraving these tactical formations. So the ninth young master worried that Li Yunxin was angry with him for not being loyal enough and slipped away. He was busy thinking of ways to please him. After Li Yunxin walked around the reef and checked it, he went to see the ninth young master and pheasant. When they first met in the temple on a rainy night, the ninth young master explained how to eat human flesh clearly and logically. He thought he was not a good cook, but at least he would not be too bad. Who would have thought that the newly crowned Lord of Heaven was burning a few fishes on top of a ball of demonic flame? Well, he was burning them, not roasting them. Seeing that the fish were burnt and began to smoke, Pheasant was anxious. But the ninth young master said to Pheasant, "What do you know?" He said that Li Yunxin had talked about this when he was chatting with him. The meat had to be burnt with a blazing flame first to lock in the water inside so that it would be fresh and tender. Then, it would be cooked slowly with a gentle fire and finally it would be delicious. So the two demons quarreled. After a while, Li Yunxin came over. He raised his hand and waved it in the air. A handful of water extinguished the demon flame and washed the charred fish into the sea. The two demons were stunned. They thought he was going to get angry, but they saw Li Yunxin's serious face. "Stop it. Since the formation is fine, I'm going to get down to business." He looked at the ninth young master. "In a while, I'm going to summon Lord Shinryu. Do you want to meet her here or hide for a while?" The ninth young master opened his eyes wide. "Summon Lord? Didn't she ask us to go to the Dragon Island? Oh, didn't she ask us to suppress the rebellion first, then go to the island? Oh, didn't she ask us to suppress the rebellion first, then go to the island? She can crown me as Lord Tongtian, but I haven't done anything." This great demon at the peak of the realm of truth was nervous like a child. Li Yunxin sighed. "You are Dragon's son and Shinryu is the Dragon Lord. According to the secular relationship, you are her son. What's the point of a son meeting his mother?" He paused and looked at the ninth young master. "On the contrary, you can ask her for something. A son does things for his mother. It's not a big deal to be spoiled." Chapter 655. The ninth young master's eyes widened. "Act coquettishly?" It was as if he could not understand the word. "What do you want? What do you want?" Li Yunxin thought for a while. "For example, a token. We have to help the Lord deal with the Dragon King of the Sea. However, the Dragon King of the Sea has thousands of soldiers. Some of them are stubborn, but some of them can be won over. These guys, once they see the token of the Shinryu, they might change sides and surrender. So, it's best if we get a token of the Shinryu. I used that token to form your body. Ask her if she still has it." The ninth young master was still widening his eyes. His eyes were big to begin with, but now they looked like two black and white pearls. "But how do I want it?" "Just ask for it. Just ask. The Lord loves you so much, how can he not give it to you?" The ninth young master looked confused. Either he did not believe that someone would love him, or he did not know what it meant to be loved. Before he could say anything, Li Yunxin had already stomped his foot. The patterns carved on the reef lit up, forming a mysterious talisman in the air. The red dot between his eyebrows shot out a golden light and gathered in the talisman. It was like a star that appeared in the daytime, suddenly flashed, and then dimmed. Although the formation could not be fully activated. But at least it could be used in part. After the flash, a transparent door appeared in the air, as if someone had used a sharp knife to cut the space in this world, creating another space. The ninth young master was shocked. "I haven't..." Before he could finish, a furious voice came from behind the door. "Who is it?" As soon as she finished speaking, a burst of fire gushed out from the door. Li Yunxin paused on the rock again. The surroundings of the stone pillar immediately lit up with layers of profound light, completely blocking and absorbing the firelight. It seemed to have absorbed the power contained in it. He raised his voice and called out, "Lord! This lowly official has a presumptuous request to disturb Lord." Shinryu soon appeared at the door. It was as if someone was sitting at home, but the door was suddenly knocked down. This time she did not transform into a dignified robe. Instead, she was dressed in a very elegant and refreshing manner. When he appeared, his brows were tightly furrowed. It was obvious that he was extremely dissatisfied. When he looked down at Li Yunxin from above, he immediately opened his mouth and shouted. But when he saw the ninth young master, he suppressed his anger. "Lord Wei River, Lord Tongtian, how dare you?" Pheasant had already jumped down from the stone pillar. This was the way of survival for low-level little demons. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, as long as there were many great demons involved, he would try to stay as far away as possible. Demons were not humans. Unless they were especially perverted, people liked to bestow benefits when they were happy. But demons were different. When they were angry, they would eat something. When they were happy, they would also eat something. Who knew if Shinryu, the lord of the demons, was the same? The ninth young master was not as calm as Li Yunxin. When he saw Shinryu's serious face, he was at a loss of what to do. He bowed deeply and called out, "Lord God! Lord God! Lord God!" But Li Yunxin interrupted him. "If it wasn't for the urgency, I wouldn't have been so bold. Lord, yesterday it was there." He pointed at the immovable cube as he spoke. "Nearly 10,000 allied troops surrounded me. Luckily, my friend helped me and I was able to defeat them. Lord God didn't see the situation at that time. It was extremely dangerous." Shinryu stared at him sternly for a while. She seemed to be less angry. She even smiled mysteriously. "So Lord Wei River is in a hurry to show off? 2 against 10,000 is indeed an achievement worth showing off. But Lord Wei River, don't you want to tell me who your friend is?" Li Yunxin immediately said, "Lord God's blood is in my body. How can I not know? That person is the princess of Dongting, Red Lady with the dragon soul. She originally came to find trouble with Lord God. But I advised her that she was no match for you. If she insisted, she would be asking for trouble. Why not help me to calm the sea first? Then I will help her solve the misunderstanding." She agreed with me and followed my advice. Now I sent her away so she won't mess up our plan. But Lord, after the battle yesterday, I found that not all the marine tribes in the sea respect the Dragon King. Many of them are actually loyal to Lord Shinryu. Lord Tongtian just said to me." He paused and looked at the ninth young master. "Lord Tongtian, a gentleman doesn't covet other people's achievements. You should say it yourself." The ninth young master was still in a daze. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while. When he saw Shinryu also looked at him, he hurriedly said, "Lord, what? It's like this. The demons in the sea can't be killed. If you have Shinryu's token, you can use it to command the demons. Maybe you can make them surrender without fighting. Please give me another token," he said while looking at Li Yunxin. Even a child would be able to tell that Li Yunxin was the one who taught her. Shinryu frowned and looked at him. He didn't know what he was going to do. Li Yunxin coughed softly. The ninth young master looked at his face and remembered that he was called acting coquettishly. How could he act coquettishly? He would never have done such a thing in the first place. However, Li Yunxin didn't give him time to consider when he was in a difficult situation. She had alarmed the true dragon. When Shinryu appeared, her majestic appearance made it difficult for him to think. Most of the time he could only follow his instincts. He was in a dilemma. The moment he thought of the 2 words that Li Yunxin mentioned, it was as if he didn't think it through. He opened his mouth and said, "Mother Divine Monarch, please bestow me another true dragon token on the account that I risked my life in the expedition on the sea." Shinryu was stunned and looked at Li Yunxin. If he could speak his mind, he would say, "What the hell are you trying to do?" The ninth young master respected his mother Shinryu, and felt that Shinryu was the ruler of the demons in the world, and he was made from her scales. In addition, he didn't know much about the world, so although he followed Li Yunxin, he only knew about the battles and killing, but he didn't know the reason for these battles. He was like a small general in a dynasty that was about to be destroyed. He knew that there were emperors and generals, that the world belonged to him, and that he had to kill the enemy and serve the country, but he couldn't see the whole picture and realize that he was involved in the torrent of history. The poor ninth young master thought that Shinryu was still the ruler of the demons in the world and still had the supreme authority, but he didn't know that the dignity of this mother Shinryu was almost gone even with Li Yunxin by his side. Li Yunxin and Shinryu made an agreement to use the ninth young master to make a fuss. Shinryu also wanted to maintain his dignity in front of the ninth young master, especially when Li Yunxin was by his side. This Li Yunxin was detestable. But the ninth young master respected her from the bottom of his heart, and Shinryu needed this kind of respect. This was Li Yunxin's guess. Now he realized that his guess was correct. The ninth young master said those words that made Shinryu frown, but he got the result he wanted. The god in the air stared at Li Yunxin suspiciously for a while, and then at the ninth young master for a while. He said in a low voice, "If it's just this, it's not an unreasonable request." Li Yunxin used Shinryu's scales to draw the ninth young master, and Shinryu wanted him to create more dragon sun like this. No matter what he wanted the Shinryu's token made from the scales, he would have to get it back in the future. It was not a bad idea to give it to him for now. But Wei Shuikun, you have to explain something first, then I can give you the token without worry. Shinryu's face darkened. Last time I gave you a drop of blood and you placed it between your eyebrows. But last night I felt the blood leave your body and it took almost half a night. Wei Shuikun, why is that? Shinryu claimed that the earring made from the blood could hear what Li Yunxin was doing. But when Li Yunxin was surrounded by Constable Xing in the forest of Qinghe County, he only drew the ninth young master, and Li Yunxin was able to sense it and rush over. It showed that demons and cultivators were very sensitive to things that were related to their origin. That drop of blood could not only hear, it could also feel. It was attached to something and not attached to something. Spiritual energy was connected to the blood, and it was almost like a sensor. But last night Shinryu did feel something strange. Her drop of blood left Li Yunxin's body. The Shinryu-kun was the leader of the demons, so he should have a lot of things to take care of every day. He was not like a spy, who would stay in front of the stage and carefully listen to the information from the other side, except when he was sleeping. Only when he felt that it was an important moment, or when he was free, he would try to listen. But last night was different. There was an obvious abnormal change. The blood left his body, or Li Yunxin used some method to block it. This kind of blatant action clearly meant that he did something last night that he did not want her to know. Today, even if Li Yunxin did not come to her, she would still go to Li Yunxin. That was why she asked this question. After asking this question, she carefully observed Li Yunxin, and realized that there was something wrong with him. Just like what the ninth young master had felt before, Li Yunxin seemed to be injured. The injury was very serious and it was in his spirit. But he was safe and sound when he charged into the army. What happened last night? Who was it that could injure his spirit? He was the dragon son of the mysterious realm. When Li Yunxin heard this, she blinked and coughed. She looked around and said, "Jun Shang, it's just that women wear earrings, necklaces, forehead wipes and the like. At night they also take them off. This small official occasionally takes them off, it's no big deal." Shinryu smiled and looked at the ninth young master. "Since you call me the Lord God's mother, let me ask you, my little son. Do you know where Lord Wei River went last night?" At first, the ninth young master was flattered, but then he showed a troubled expression. He looked at Li Yunxin, then looked at Shinryu and finally said in a low voice, "My lord, Lord Wei River, he ran around on the sea last night, shaving off many mountains to make this stone pillar and carving the formation." Shinryu smiled. "Is that so? I know that he shaved off mountains. This was after he extracted the blood essence and before the sun was about to rise. Earlier, what did Lord Wei River do?" Li Yunxin sighed, looked at the ninth young master, then looked at Shinryu. "My lord, there are some things that are better left unasked than asked. I really don't know how to answer." The true dragon smiled again. "Since you don't want to say it and you don't think it's hard work enough, then wait until you experience how difficult the battle is, and when you know that you need my help, then you can ask me for the token." After saying this, his figure suddenly faded away as if he was about to disappear. When the ninth young master heard Shinryu's tone, he became anxious. Li Yunxin also seemed to be anxious. He gritted his teeth and said, "My lord, I'll tell you." Shinryu's figure did not become clear, as if it was about to disappear. But in the end he turned around to look at him. Li Yunxin said, "I went after Li Xinyu." The ninth young master was stunned. Shinryu was also stunned. Li Yunxin sighed, snorted, turned his face away and said angrily, "My lord, I'm also a man. Which man wouldn't be tempted when he sees a beautiful woman coming from afar for him? That kind of thing. Do I have to bring the Lord Wei's essence blood and let him hear it? That would be an insult to the Lord Wei." The ninth young master jumped up as if his eyes were about to pop out. You went to provoke her?" He looked at Li Yunxin from head to toe, suddenly clapped his hands and laughed as if he had completely forgotten about the majestic Shinryu above. Ha, I know, you and her. Ha, she didn't want to, so she hit you? Yes, ha, besides her cultivation, who else could hurt your soul? Ah. Oh, you actually. Ah. Li Yunxin also stared at him, his face slightly red. Who said she didn't want to? She was just shy, embarrassed, and forgot how to control her strength. Extremely close to the Grand Elder, can you withstand a light blow? In the end, didn't you? However, ninth young master only giggled and looked at him with a mischievous gaze. Li Yunxin snorted angrily and waved his sleeves. If you don't believe me, you can ask her. From the beginning, I didn't come to her, but she came to me. After saying this, he looked at Shinryu. You can also ask her if you don't believe me. But after just one look, he seemed to be embarrassed and looked away, coughed twice heavily and said, That's why I asked you to give me a token. Today because of an accident, I was injured. Will take some time for me to recover. I used this stone pillar to set up a formation. It can protect me, and with Shinryu's token, it can scare the enemies and not let them see any flaws. Shinryu stared at Li Yunxin as if she wanted to see flowers on his face. But every word that Li Yunxin said seemed to be true, and every expression seemed to have no flaws. The ninth young master's thoughts were simple, but she was just surprised. But would he do such a thing? She looked at the stone pillar again. The stone pillar that was densely covered with formations was indeed like what Li Yunxin said. The formation on it was unusually strong, and it seemed difficult to be shaken. Once this thing was activated, it could indeed protect herself, but she still felt that something was wrong. Chapter 656. She was about to ask, Do you have any evidence to prove it? When she heard Li Yunxin said, Don't ask me to prove it, I don't need to use this kind of thing to fool the Lord. He used to be respectful when he met Shinryu. Last time he was rebellious, but it was more like a reasonable and legitimate equal attitude. This time it was different. There was a hint of resentment and a hint of willfulness in his voice. He used to call the ninth young master spoiled, but the ninth young master was very obvious. Now he was also spoiled, but it was subtle and unique. How could Shinryu think he would be like this? But he also didn't believe that, I don't need to use this kind of thing to fool the Lord. There was nothing he couldn't do. However, if Li Yunxin deliberately lied, she couldn't find out anything. She never thought that Li Yunxin would be honest and not make any mistakes. But she also had a plan in her mind, it was just not the right time. When that thing came out, no matter how cunning Li Yunxin was, he would be at her mercy. So she smiled slightly. Okay. It's great that you can find such a helper. After dealing with the things on the sea, I should also deal with the things between me and her. For now, you can take this token. If you do things honestly, there may be a surprise. She waved her hand and threw a token to him. Li Yunxin reached out to catch it and looked at it. It was indeed what he wanted. It was different from the token he found in the Yunshan Kuan Hall, but the material was the same. There was some familiar dragon aura and some other mixed aura. At that time, because of those auras, Red Lady mistakenly thought it was not a treasure. But now, if this token was really a part of Shinryu's scale, maybe those mixed auras were something else that he hadn't figured out yet. He called this Shinryu token, but there was also Dragon God token. Now he still had a Dragon God token. It was given to him by the Lord of Dongting when he appeared. It was long and thin like a dagger. Dragon God token was more well known. All monsters knew that it was made from a piece of scale that broke when Shinryu fought with King Rock. The dragon aura on the Dragon God token was pure and strong, which could directly frighten monsters and make them feel awe. But the Shinryu token Li Yunxin found on the cloud was not. The dragon aura was not strong, so it was fake. But the problem was that it could be used as the core to draw the body of the dragons of the ninth young master. If these two things came from the true dragon, did it mean that the true dragon itself had undergone some sort of change? In the past, Shinryu to conquer the Midland. The current true dragon was hiding on the Dragon Island and stirring up internal strife among the dragon sons. She even needed Li Yunxin, whom she didn't trust, to help her complete some things. At least from Li Yunxin's point of view, Shinryu was undoubtedly weak. Was it because of this weakness that the dragon aura became mixed? But why did it decline so much? Was it just because of the dragon soul? If it was, why did it do that? He thought about these questions for a long time, but he couldn't find the final answer. And now he didn't need to think about it anymore. He came to the sea. He was ready to do something. If these things, even if only a part of it, could develop in the direction he expected, then all the mysteries would be solved. In the past he was a small character with no power. Now he was an important person. In the East Sea, whether it was Shinryu, the king of the East Sea, or Li Yunxin, each force knew that the other might have other thoughts. But each force didn't care about those thoughts. They all wanted to use each other to achieve their own goals, and they all believed that once they got what they wanted, they would have enough power to control the whole situation. It was like a game of cards. Everyone had their own trump cards in hand, observing and probing. They hoped to sweep everything at the last moment and the winner would take it all. Shinryu threw the token, glanced at Li Yunxin, then at the ninth young master, smiled and said, "Lord Tongdun, do your job well. I'll wait to see you on Dragon Island." The ninth young master quickly bowed and his voice was slightly trembling, "Yes, I will remember the Lord's order." When he raised his head again, the door in the air was gone, and so was the Lord Shinryu. The ninth young master immediately jumped up. "Did you see that? Did you hear that?" Li Yunxin rubbed the token in his hand and replied casually, "The Lord called me Lord Tongtian. He said to wait for me on Dragon Island." Ah. The ninth young master put his hands behind his back and held his head high. He didn't look like he was trembling in front of Shinryu. He looked like a child who had just been praised. "Tell me, what should we do next? Where should we kill first?" "To the south." As he spoke, he waved his hand to the south. With a loud bang, a series of huge waves exploded on the surface of the sea in the south. "Or west? Or north?" As he spoke, he exerted his strength randomly, as if he had nowhere to vent his strength. The surface of the sea rumbled and water droplets fell from the sky like a rainstorm. Li Yunxin smiled. "Ninth young master, it's not the time to kill everyone yet. Look at me, we still have to wait for a while until I recover my strength, then we can start." Only then did Jiu Gongzi stop and look at him with a frown. "You really?" Li Yunxin shrugged. "You can ask her." The ninth young master hurriedly shook his head. He shook his head and said disappointedly, "That little fish is not easy to deal with now. I don't want to see her. So what should we do? Someone will tell us what to do." Although he often worked for Li Yunxin, he had some experience. But according to him, he used to listen to books in the Lushan Academy in the city of Wei, so he gradually gained spirituality. Therefore he was not as eccentric as ordinary demons. Instead he was quite kind. Therefore when he saw the junior colonel smiling at him, he smiled back in a friendly way. This smile froze the junior colonel's smile on his face. He thought that this person might be more cruel than Lord Tongtian. Lord Tongtian's cruelty was written on his face, but this one. He had seen many demons who smiled while attacking him. He was the scariest one. He hurriedly avoided Pheasant's eyes. At this time, Li Yunxin turned around and asked him with a cold face, "Why are you so late?" The junior colonel didn't understand and made an ah sound. Li Yunxin immediately showed an impatient expression. "You don't understand? Then go back. Tell your family's Jun Shang to find someone smarter." The junior colonel hurriedly said, "Yes, I understand. Lord of Wei River, I should have arrived this morning. But it took me some time to find my master. Secondly, I got lost." The ninth young master immediately shouted, "Lost? Lost what? Since you are the subordinate of the Lord of East Sea, how could you get lost in your own sea?" The junior colonel turned to the ninth young master and said in a trembling voice, "Lord Tongdun, please let me know. I was originally a member of the Sea tribe. Before I attained Tao, I drifted with the tide and didn't like to look at the road with my eyes. I can't change this habit even though I have some cultivation. I still follow the Reiki in the sea. Most of the Reiki in the sea goes with the tide. A few days ago the Reiki in the tide was chaotic and the sea was vast, so it was inconvenient for me to walk. Originally I was getting used to it. But last night I encountered the turbulence which made me dizzy. After searching for a whole night, I smelled a familiar smell in the morning and found my way here." He acted like this for the ninth young master, but his words were for Li Yunxin. The ninth young master was satisfied with his attitude, so he didn't scold him anymore. Instead he coughed reservedly, "Well, it makes sense. In the past, when Li Yunxin was a human, he was afraid of him. But he was not afraid of him in a humble way. He was afraid of him in a dignified manner. Later, Li Yunxin became Dragon Son and he also became Dragon Son. At least in the eyes of the ninth young master, they were like friends. Pheasant was driven by Li Yunxin, but he tolerated the ninth young master and always had a smile on his face. The ninth young master thought that since he was a subordinate of his friend, he should give him some face, so he didn't bully him too much. Until now, this was the first time he saw someone trembling in fear and being respectful to him. He was in a good mood, feeling that the sea and the sky were bluer, so he didn't pay attention to what he said. Li Yunxin snorted, "I will believe your words for now. But today is the first time. If you are not clever again, I will assume that you are not familiar with my style of doing things. If there is a third time, I will give you a chance for the sake of Lord Donghai. But as the saying goes, things don't happen more than 3 times. If there's a 4th time, go back." He said this sternly, not waiting for the junior colonel to reply. He said, "Now tell me, Lord Donghai, have you figured out what to do next?" The junior colonel hurriedly said, "Lord Wei River, my lord has agreed to all your previous requests. Before I came, my lord had summoned the messengers of the sea to discuss the matter of attacking you. Today I am here to give you a message. Last night, the remaining 8 dragon kings all agreed that since thousands of people are no match for Lord Wei River, they should attack with a large army. But it is not something that can be done in a day or even a few days, so we should ask for help from the 10,000-year ancestor." Once Xiao Xiao came to his senses, he began to speak in a logical manner. Li Yunxin raised his hand. "What is the 10,000-year ancestor?" The junior colonel coughed. He seemed to feel that it was inappropriate for Li Yunxin to call the 10,000-year ancestor a thing, but he didn't dare to say it directly. He could only pretend that he didn't hear it, but his tone became more and more respectful. "The 10,000-year ancestor is a powerful figure who lives in the East Ruo River. It is said that he has lived for 10,000 years, and he has countless disciples. On the land, there are cultivators and demons from the Shenmen sect. There are very few people in the sea, but there are many demons. But there are also cultivators. These cultivators are demons who want to learn divine sense and Tao. They are all disciples of the 10,000-year ancestor. There are also many disciples of the 10,000-year ancestor in the mansion of the Dragon King of the Sea. No one dares to be disrespectful to him." Li Yunxin was a little stunned and turned to look at the 9th young master and Pheasant. "Did you hear that? The world is really full of strange things. I didn't know there was such a person in the sea." Then he looked at the junior colonel. "According to what you said, the 10,000-year ancestor is very powerful? How is it compared to the Shenmen sect? There are disciples of the 10,000-year ancestor in the mansion of the Dragon King. Are they not afraid that the 10,000-year ancestor will do something bad to them?" The junior colonel hurriedly waved his hand. "What are you talking about, Dragon King? The 10,000-year ancestor has a noble character. For 10,000 years. If he really wanted to do something, he would have done it long ago. It's just that he is not interested in fighting for power, and only wants to pursue the Great Way." Li Yunxin nodded. "Okay. Then tell me in detail about this noble character who has lived for 10,000 years, the 10,000-year ancestor." Chapter 657. In fact, the junior colonel didn't expect that his first meeting would be like this, talking to 3 terrifying demons under the blue sky and blue sea, on a warm reef. Although it wasn't a friendly exchange, it was much better than he expected. At least he didn't have an arm or a leg broken or his life threatened. From the looks of it, this Lord of the Wei River didn't seem to be as difficult to get along with as Lord Donghai thought. Since it was a good start, the junior colonel naturally told him everything he knew. He was happy to tell Li Yunxin about the 10,000-year-old ancestor. He believed that by doing so, the great fiendish demon would be even more apprehensive. It would also increase his chances of survival. The junior colonel spent half an hour telling the story in detail. During this period, in order to leave a good impression on Li Yunxin, he summarized many things in detail. He brushed over the unimportant ones and spent a great deal of time explaining the important ones. It was as if he had made all these things into a story. At first, the 9th young master was impatient, full of contempt for the ancestor. But soon he was attracted by the junior colonel's story and listened with great interest. According to the junior colonel, the 10,000-year-old ancestor lived longer on the sea than Shinryu, and even longer than many big demons. In this world, it had never been determined whether humans or demons had the longest lifespan. Mortals couldn't live more than 100 years. After cultivation, they could transcend and live a long life. When they reached the perfected being realm, they could be called immortal. But in fact, they would die. If a profound realm cultivator couldn't enter the grand supreme realm, the longest recorded lifespan was 3,000 or 4,000 years. It was said that this was because the cultivator's body also had a limit. The body of a mortal was like a paper bag. The paper bag was filled with air. When they began to cultivate, the air would turn into water, and the body would be reborn and become a bag. The more they cultivated, the heavier the things inside would become. Maybe they would become mercury or iron. Therefore, the outer shell would be stronger. When they reached the profound realm, the body would be unbelievably strong. but the spiritual energy inside would also become stronger and stronger. If they couldn't enter the Grand Supreme Realm, their body wouldn't be able to bear the spiritual energy inside, and they would explode and die. However, this process was extremely slow and would take thousands of years to complete. However, there was a way to stop the growth of spiritual energy. However, when one's cultivation reached a certain level, the spiritual energy in one's body would be integrated into one. When one moved, sat, or lay down, the spiritual energy would circulate spontaneously, regulating one's breathing and breathing. Unless he dispersed his spiritual chi or his own cultivation base, he wouldn't be able to do so. However, no matter which one it was, it meant that he would die and his physical body would not be preserved. As the saying goes, there is no retreat in the path of cultivation. This was also the meaning behind it. At the Grand Supreme Realm, one should be able to live longer. However, no one knew what the limit of a Grand Supreme cultivator's lifespan was. After becoming a Grand Supreme, one would have to ascend. In the past 1,000 years, there had been no news of the Celestials, and the Grand Elder had not been able to ascend. This was the first time such a situation had occurred. However, it was very common for demons to live for a long time. Profound realm demons like Lord Dong Ting, who had lived for more than 3,000 years, weren't rare at all. It wasn't strange for a true realm demon to live for 1 or 2,000 years. When a cultivator reached the transcendent state, their lifespan was only 200 or 300 years. But when a demon reached the transcendent state, he could live for nearly 1,000 years without seeking death. The ocean was vast and there were more demons in it than on Midland. Shinryu appeared 2,000 years ago. But before that, there were already many demons in the East Sea who had lived for more than 3, 4, or 5,000 years. At that time, the demons were like the feudal states on the land. The vast ocean around their lair was their sphere of influence. Some of them were cruel and liked to go on expeditions. This kind of people always died early. Some of the more docile ones only guarded their own territory and slowly developed it. In the end, they could be considered to be living in harmony with each other and living in peace. When Shinryu appeared, he disrupted the peace. First, he set off a storm of blood and killed all those who disobeyed him. Then he recruited those who volunteered to join him and assigned 9 immortals to take care of them. When he mentioned 9 immortals, he was vague. Because he had only been cultivating for a few hundred years, and he was born under the banner of the Lord of the East Sea. The Lord of the East Sea had always claimed that the previous goddess Penglai was a traitor, so he couldn't say too much. He just needed to let everyone know. But those who disobeyed were killed, and those who surrendered were taken in. There were always fish that escaped the net. There were also some demons in the ocean who didn't like to gather subordinates or take over territories. They only focused on cultivation and wanted to reach a higher realm. These demons might have lived for more than 4,000 or 5,000 years. But because they lived in seclusion, very few people knew about them. Another type of demon was the 10,000-year ancestor. Before Shinryu appeared, very few people knew about such a person. After Shinryu took in many monster kings because there was a system and the demons were able to communicate with each other, they realized something. Some demons had supernatural powers that didn't belong to them. Demons were born with several kinds of supernatural powers after they gained enlightenment and gained a human body. They didn't need to learn them because they were born with them. But now, there were some demons that had mastered something similar to Taoism. These demons usually lived in the territories of many monster kings, so they didn't attract much attention. Even if someone paid attention, they would only think that they were really powerful. But as these demons were disrupted and gathered together, more and more people realized that these powerful demons all looked very similar. Compared to other demons, most of them were mild-tempered and knowledgeable. And the knowledgeable here mainly referred to their understanding of things on land. These demons didn't often show their true bodies. Perhaps it was because they wanted to hide their supernatural powers. Some of them occasionally revealed their past, either claiming to be from the east, or saying that they had a fortuitous encounter. There were also quite a few who said that their master was the lifeless immortal gate of the Ruoshui River. On land, everyone respected the Celestials, thinking that there really were deities in the world. But on the sea, without the teachings of the Celestial Gate cultivators, the demons didn't respect the Celestials a lot. Most of them felt that they were just another type of existence with great power, like the demons to humans, the fish and beasts in the sea. So when they heard the name Lifeless Immortal Gate, no one cared at first. They only felt that it was just nonsense. This kind of thing wasn't rare in the sea. Any fiendish demon would try to stick gold on themselves. But when it came to Shinryu, the demons that had fused together realized that it wasn't just one of their brothers who boasted like this. Maybe somewhere far away, under the command of a certain demon king, there was someone who said the same thing. This meant that the lifeless immortal gate might really exist. It had many disciples, and when the demon kings were in charge of their own mountains, they had already been scattered all over the ocean, and now they had finally surfaced. Then there was a question. This question wasn't easy to ask. Anyone who found out that their subordinates belonged to someone else would also feel surprised, angry, or terrified. After torturing and killing nearly 100 demons who had exposed their identities, they finally realized that the history of the lifeless immortal gate was long and terrifying. To become a so-called member of the immortal gate, one had to have a lucky chance. For example, a demon who had just achieved the Tao might be found by someone. He said that he had been observing for a long time, and now he would give you some tests. After passing the test, he would guide you to become a member of the immortal gate. Every demon had their own master, and could only be guided. They would never accept anyone taking the initiative to join them. He wanted to interrogate a demon and find out who his master was. Then torture his master, and ask about his master's master. Demons had a long lifespan, and most of these lifeless immortal gate people had high positions under the demon kings because of their abilities and knowledge, so it was even more difficult for them to die. As a result, one could pull out a string of them. He slowly touched them. Finally, he touched those who were already dead. The lifeless immortal gate was similar to the celestial sect of wonders in that it focused on inheritance. Every disciple clearly remembered their own master, ancestor, and so on. In the end, he discovered, could be traced back to more than 10,000 years ago. Going back further, because the evidence was untraceable and the memories were fuzzy, there was no way to confirm it. But at the very least, the lifeless immortal gate had indeed been passed down in the ocean for more than 10,000 years. At this time, the shock and anger in the hearts of those who knew should have been mostly replaced by fear. The disciples of the lifeless immortal gate were all over the ocean, and there were probably even more that had not been found. Because they had many kinds of abilities and knowledge, most of them were in high positions. For 10,000 years. Among these people, some were deputy generals under the demon king, and some became military advisors. Some became the prince consort, and some even became the demon empress. If these people had any malicious intentions, they would have been able to turn the entire ocean upside down long before the true dragon showed up. Without the need for the true dragon to take action, they would have been able to turn the entire ocean upside down long before the true dragon appeared. After realizing this, they gradually slowed down, allowing communication to become possible. After a long period of 50 years, they finally understood the truth. The ruler of the lifeless immortal gate was called the 10,000-year-old ancestor. The disciples of the immortal gate called him ancestor in private, and on more formal occasions they called him sect leader. This 10,000-year-old ancestor was said to have lived for 40,000 years. There were even those who revered him to the extreme, claiming that the old ancestor was born with the heavens and earth, and would exist forever. The dojo of the lifeless immortal gate was in the Ruo Shui. Everyone knew how terrifying the Ruo Shui was. No matter how powerful your abilities were, once you entered the area of the Ruo Shui, your abilities would quickly disappear. So no matter how arrogant the demons on the sea were, they all knew not to go into the Ruo Shui. But it was said that the old ancestor's cultivation was extremely high, and he preferred to go to dangerous places. Opening up a dojo in the Ruo Shui was not without its benefits. After all, demons were demons, and they were naturally more cruel and stubborn than humans. Demons had to turn into a human, and once they turned into a human they would have abilities. Many stubborn disciples all had abilities. What would happen if they caused a ruckus? But if it was the dojo in the Ruo Shui, their abilities would be gone. Demons were no different from mortals, just that their bodies were stronger, and their personalities were more stubborn. To control them, it could be said that it saved a lot of effort. And it was precisely because in the Ruo Shui, if someone else led an army to attack, they would have to follow the way humans fought on land and honestly cross the sea by boat. The sea was vast, and the demons were not good at building ships, so where would they find a fleet to fight? It was also because of this that they realized that the 10,000-year-old ancestor, whether the rumor was true or not, had already firmly held the initiative. And they only found out now and were making a fuss about nothing. It was really too late. And then, until now, the Dragon King of the Sea, like the Lord of the East Sea, searched for skilled craftsmen on land, and transported them to the sea to train, was probably because of this. As the saying goes, it's better to be prepared. If one day something that no one wanted to see happened, and a fight broke out, they had to make sure that they had a way to transport their soldiers over. After the demons knew about this, they gradually realized that the lifeless immortal gate of the 10,000-year-old ancestor did not seem to have any dangerous intentions. That old ancestor never showed his true face. But he also sent messengers to bring a message. It said that he had seen a heavenly being in the past, and secretly learned Shen techniques from him. After that, in order to concentrate on cultivation, he went to live in seclusion in the Rua Shui, in order to put himself in a dead end and then leave the Rua Shui, or he would die in there. Later he really did succeed. Since he succeeded, he could not bear to enjoy the Shen techniques alone. So he found those demons that occasionally wandered into the Rua Shui to pass on his skills. He was originally free to pass on his skills, and only depended on fate. But he had lived for too long. Even if he only accepted a disciple every few decades, after tens of thousands of years, his disciples had spread all over the ocean. He was afraid of arousing the fear of many monster kings. He was even more afraid that this secret would be known, and people would come to his door to interrogate him about the Shen techniques, which would cause a lot of trouble. So he endured it and did not let his disciples leak anything. After that, it was said that Shinryu went to the lifeless immortal gate to meet the 10,000-year-old ancestor. Then he announced that the 10,000-year-old ancestor really had no ill intentions, and the demons released the people of the immortal gate, and announced that they would no longer pursue the matter. Until now, if someone was a disciple of the immortal gate, it was a glorious identity. It was easy to get promoted and even easier to stay alive. The Dragon King would occasionally choose some confidants, and wanted to send them to the immortal gate. But the 10,000-year-old ancestor really only looked at talent, some were accepted and most were rejected. As for what the old ancestor was, whether he was a human or a demon, it was still uncertain. But he should be a demon. Even the Grand Sage would find it hard to live for 10,000 years. The junior colonel said all this and then said, "I have a relative. He is a disciple of the lifeless immortal gate. A few days ago he was invited by me, but now that his lordship is in need of people, he temporarily didn't go. There are many capable people under the old ancestor. Wei River Lord killed the 10,000-strong army a few days ago, and there were no people from the immortal gate in the army. But very soon those people will come to test Wei River Lord's strength. Unlike us demons who only know how to use our natural abilities, they also know how to set up formations, use magic tools and dispatch troops. Wei River Lord must not be careless. His lordship said that if Wei River Lord can defeat them and make them return in low spirits, it will be easier for him to do things in the future." When the 9th young master heard this, he snorted, "What's there to be afraid of? I have seen hundreds of thousands of demon soldiers fighting with the cultivators of the celestial gate on the land, magical treasures flying everywhere. When have I ever been afraid? Little guy, let me ask you, when will they come? Let them see how powerful this young master is." The junior colonel hurriedly turned to the 9th young master and said with a smile, reporting to Lord Tongtun, "They will arrive very soon. When I left, they were already gathering troops. I reckon they will come at any time. Maybe now we have already been surrounded." 9th young master was taken aback. He exclaimed. He quickly turned around and looked all around. Where? *****. Recently, if I have given everyone the impression of too much description of the background and details, my thoughts are like this. The main purpose is to create a three-dimensional sense. For example, Shaoli came to the ocean. Then everyone's first impression of the ocean may be vast, right? The vast sea, the vast sky. Then it is difficult to have anything else. It is not like on the land, because we live on the land. Just mention a town, and instantly imagine houses, inns and so on. Taverns, streets, pedestrians, hawkers, merchants and so on. If I say fine sunlight through the shade of trees, again, friends with good imagination may not only imagine a meadow, a big tree and the scene of the sun shining high up in the sky, but also the scene of young boys and girls tired of chasing and playing, lying on the green meadow with their eyes closed with a slight smile on the corner of their mouth. So I have to spend more ink to write something. For example, when Li Yunxin first came to the sea, he only had an impression of the sea. Then he slowly knew that there was Penglai Island. He also knew that there were many mountains on Penglai Island, and there were magnificent palaces on the mountains. He also knew that there were many demons outside the island, and the demons had their nests. He also knew that the sea was actually very lively with a social structure and so on. These things have to be explained bit by bit and then the whole world can slowly appear. So this is not a fluke, I want to build it slowly. Chapter 658. At this time, Li Yunxin's face suddenly turned cold and he asked the junior colonel, You said you followed the flow of spiritual energy in the sea. But last night the spiritual energy was chaotic and you lost your way. How did you find your way back? The junior colonel scratched his head. It's chaotic. But it's strange, when it's almost noon, the surrounding area is no longer chaotic and Li Yunxin let out a sigh of relief. Then I guess you're right. We've been surrounded. After saying this, he slowly walked to the center of the reef and lightly stamped his foot. Interesting. Suddenly there was a rumbling sound in the sea. It was as if his foot had nailed something to the bottom of the sea, causing the whole seabed to shake. In this short moment, countless golden lines appeared above and below the sea, like a spider web. And the center of the spider web was the stone pillar they were on. Li Yunxin stood with his hands behind his back and shouted, "Friends of the lifeless immortal sect, come out." But the sea was still calm after he shouted. He thought it would be immediately waving flags and loud gongs and drums. However, the scene that he expected did not appear. It was as if everything was just an illusion. The ninth young master, who had previously shouted to show them some power, now had a serious expression on his face. He felt like he was standing on the top of a high wall, and there were archers lying in ambush around him. He didn't know when they would shoot him. Hearing Li Yunxin's shout and still not showing up, he felt even more uneasy. He moved closer to Li Yunxin and whispered, "I say, did you see wrong?" Li Yunxin calmly pulled him aside and asked him to give up the formation map under his feet. "I can't be wrong. It's just that the person who came is a bit wild." After saying this, he glanced around and laughed again. Interesting. He always had a strong curiosity about the unknown. For example, everything he saw when he first entered the cultivation world was novel to him. It was like the experience of some people in the game in his previous life. When he first arrived in a world, everything was unknown. He ran around and saw a lot of new things. But after experiencing many things, he had now reached the mysterious realm. Although he hadn't reached the Grand Supreme level, he had a good understanding of many things in this world. He only cultivated the painting Dao, and only had a slight understanding of Dao Tong and Kenzo techniques. But as the saying goes, if you understand one thing, you will understand all things. It was just like how once gaming fans understood the mechanics of a game, even if they didn't run through the entire map or experience every activity, they would roughly know what it was all about. Perhaps there were subtle changes, but the boundaries and scope were already imaginable. It was a little boring. But the methods of the lifeless immortal sect were a little interesting. Due to some unimaginable reason, the chaotic flow of spiritual power in the eyes of Xiao Xiao and the others seemed to have some sort of pattern to it. That was why he could sense the arrival of Xiao Xiao. However, he did not sense anyone from the lifeless immortal sect. Although his stomp had forced out the other party's formation, he hadn't been able to find the other party's hiding place. Judging from the current situation, the other party had already set up this formation before Xiao Xiao arrived. Although perception was the same as a mortal's observation, there was a difference between a quick glance and careful observation. However, to be able to escape the perception of the mysterious realm dragons, it was indeed a skill. The cultivation of the person who came was either ridiculously high, able to crush him, or his methods were ingenious, something he had never seen before. However, when he carefully observed it now, he felt some familiar techniques, similar to Dao Tong and Kenzo techniques. It seemed that the origin of the 10,000-year-old ancestor that Xiao Xiao had mentioned was true in some aspects. It was indeed related to the celestial heart of the celestial sect of wonders. Since he didn't want to show himself, Li Yunxin smiled and raised his right hand to make a hand seal. A buzzing sound rang out around the stone pillar, and a resplendent golden light barrier appeared. As soon as the barrier appeared, it spun rapidly, like a winch retracting its string. The surrounding golden lines appeared once again and began to flicker crazily. However, it was still no match for the barrier set up by Li Yunxin, and was pulled over by him like a fishing net. In just a breath's time, the surface of the ocean became empty, and all the strange phenomena disappeared without a trace. Only then did he shout, "Friend, why don't you show yourself?" In the east, about 300 meters away, a human figure finally appeared. The newcomer was wearing a plain green Taoist robe, his hair neatly combed, and he had a neatly trimmed short beard. He was neither ugly nor beautiful, and his face was calm. At first glance, he seemed to be the most common traveling Taoist priest in the Middle Continent. However, the aura around him was strong, and his cultivation was not lower than Li Yunxin's. As soon as the junior saw this person, his expression changed greatly, and he couldn't help but let out a cry. Li Yunxin didn't show any reaction, but the ninth young master became anxious. What's wrong? The junior took a step back as if he could stay further away from that person. As if this would allow him to distance himself even further from the man, he muttered softly, "This is the Purple Knight enlightened." The ninth young master frowned. "Go on." The Purple Knight Taoist has always been the one to contact and coordinate with the Dragon King on the sea. His cultivation is already in the mysterious realm. He can be regarded as a person of the lifeless immortal sect on the ocean. Now he is here. The junior spun around on the spot, seeming to be at a loss, or as if he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He kept muttering, "My life is over, my life is over." Hearing this, the ninth young master and Pheasant looked at each other. They had been nervous before, but now he suddenly relaxed and let out a long, "Oh." Profound realm. Taoist Lord was also in the mysterious realm. Hatred was also in the mysterious realm. Fiend King was also in the mysterious realm. Zither Lady was also in the mysterious realm. After all, there were many profound realm cultivators and demons who had died long ago at the foot of Cloudy Mountain. "Don't make a fuss." The ninth young master looked at the junior with disdain and curled his lips. As soon as the Purple Knight Taoist appeared, the corner of his mouth curved into a smile. It was not a sneer or a sneer. It was more like an ordinary martial artist visiting a friend on the land. He cupped his hands at Li Yunxin from afar. "Wei River Dragon King thinks too much. I'm the only one who came. I am not talented enough to be the vanguard. If I can match the Dragon King, I will go back to ask for reinforcements. If I can win by a stroke or two, it will save me the trouble of mobilizing so many people. Wei River Lord, I am here on behalf of the demons in Yingzhou of the West Sea to find a female demon in red. Someone said that the female demon and Wei River Lord are close friends. Does the Dragon King know where she is? If you can tell me, we can avoid the trouble of fighting today." Li Yunxin also cupped her hands. I know. I don't want to tell you." The ninth young master clapped his hands and shouted, "Good brother-in-law, how domineering." The young master was startled and panicked even more. He looked left and right as if he wanted to slip down the stone pillar and jump into the sea. But Shanji stood beside him and stared at him solemnly. The Purple Knight Taoist put down his hands and still smiled. "Good. Dragon King, please take the first move." With this move, the surface of the ocean was lowered by 3 feet. The 3 feet did not disappear into thin air. Instead, it instantly spewed out a vigorous fog, covering the sky and the sun, blocking out the sunlight. The surroundings suddenly darkened. In the blink of an eye, the white fog had turned into purple fog. It was not because of anything else, but because the dense purple electric snakes had borrowed the fog and were charging towards them in a menacing manner. Li Yunxin was also an expert in playing with thunder and lightning, but he could not create such a scene. This was not because of the demon's own supernatural power, but because it was supplemented by an unknown secret technique, and with the help of the water vapor on the ocean. The Purple Knight Taoist looked ordinary and spoke calmly. But when he made a move, his momentum was astonishing and he was extremely ferocious. With a loud hum, the shield around the stone pillar shone brightly. But in the blink of an eye, it was suppressed by the purple electric light, so dim that it was almost destroyed. Li Yunxin shouted in a deep voice, "Good, good, good." He rubbed his hands in front of his chest, and a green steel sword flew out from his chest and nailed under his feet. Once the sword was taken out, the light of the shield shone brightly, but it still could not suppress the light of the electric snakes. The hair of everyone on the stone pillar floated in the air, as if they were alive and felt the imminent danger. He rubbed his hands again and took out a sparkling and translucent lotus. Once the lotus appeared, it immediately turned into countless flowing lights and attached to the shield. With the help of the two, the shield let out a low hum again. Like the golden threads in the sea, it absorbed all the fog and electric snakes. The sea was empty. The sky turned blue again. But when they looked again, what was on the surface of the ocean was no longer water, but raging fire. It had become a veritable sea of fire. Purple Knight Enlightened stood in the air and said with a smile, "This is the means of Shi Yi's mysterious realm. Lord Wei River found it rather strenuous to receive it. I thought this shouldn't be the case. Was Dragon King injured? Do you want to fight another day?" Li Yunxin looked at him. Meeting a bosom friend in wine and a worthy opponent in chess is one of life's greatest joys. Why another day? Feel free to come. Taoist Violet Knight said, "Then please be careful, Dragon King. Now it's time for me to master the mystical realm." The junior officer was scared out of his wits and stammered, "Qing Xuan Miao. I'm here under orders. Can I, Before he could finish his words, he heard a wild, angry roar between the sea and the sky. A ferocious devil suddenly appeared, with the sun on his head and the deep sea under his feet. He put his palms together and smashed down. The strike seemed to shatter the void. The gigantic fist blotted out the sun and tore the sky apart as it fell. Along the way, rolling clouds of fire appeared and disappeared, and the dark night sky appeared again, as if it was the boundless universe before this world appeared. The stars in the sky were brilliant, magnificent and fantastic. The stars fell like a rainstorm and the space burst like bubbles. This was undoubtedly the magical power of the mystical realm. When it appeared, the fist was above the sky and the next moment, it hit the shield. The whole stone pillar suddenly sank, and even Li Yunxin opened his mouth and shouted in a low voice. This shout seemed to come from the chest cavity of the ocean. The raging fire above the sea immediately dissipated, and the waves surged up to the sky. With a buzz, a layer of brilliant armor appeared on his body, which was the treasure he refined on Cloud Mountain. Chapter 659. However, the armor that was formed from several treasures left behind by the saints shattered and turned into countless streams of light the moment the fist landed on the shield. Before the flowing lights dissipate, a second layer appears on his body, it also shatters. Then the third layer, the fourth layer, the fifth layer, the sixth layer. Every time a layer appears, the stone pillar is smashed down an inch. His face first became pale, then golden paper, then golden blood seeped out of the corners of his mouth, then from his nose and finally from the corners of his eyes. Before, the ninth young master was calm. But now he is affected even though he is in the shield. Although Li Yunxin is in charge of the big tactical circle, he is still injured by the impact with layers of treasures, not to mention his cultivation at the peak of the realm of truth. Feeling annoyed, he immediately falls to the ground and uses his monster power to protect his heart. Pheasant's cultivation is even lower. He spits out a mouthful of blood and also sits down. The cultivation of the junior colonel should be between the ninth young master and Pheasant. His face is pale and his limbs are trembling. He crawls on the ground and cries for his parents. He keeps saying things like, "I don't want the credit, help," and so on. But now the two super powerhouses in the realm of mystery are fighting and everything within 100 miles is a dead land. Where can he go? He can only pray that Li Yunxin is really as powerful as the legend says and can hold on, so that he won't die on the first day. Li Yunxin withstands the 6 waves of impact with all his strength. Then he hears the rumbling voice of the huge demon god on the top of the sky. "Lord Wei River, it's not a wise move to defend. Why don't you try to divert the force? You are seriously injured now, but I still have 30% of my strength that I haven't used yet." Li Yunxin suddenly shouts, "Do you think you are in Dongting?" His words are not understood by the Purple Knight Immortal, the ninth young master and the junior colonel. But Pheasant understands. He opens his eyes and yells with all his strength, "Dragon King! It's not worth it." However, Li Yunxin raised his sword fingers and suddenly appeared in the form of a fiend god. His entire body was surrounded by golden light, and a red dot on his forehead radiated a dazzling radiance. A humanoid puppet appeared in his palm. He pressed it against his forehead and shouted, "Let me borrow the Divine Lord's divine power." The puppet's body swelled up and turned into a humanoid figure that was no different from its fiend god body. It also supported the barrier. Just in time to see the huge fist smashing down another inch. The barrier collapsed with a loud bang and the humanoid figure also dissipated. A layer of the scales on Wei River Dragon King's body shattered. But in the end he managed to persevere. The fiery clouds in the sky vanished in an instant. Taoist Master Violet Knight's fiend god avatar also disappeared, and the surface of the ocean returned to normal. However, half of the stone pillar had already been nailed down, and the pheasant was knocked unconscious on the ground. Xiao Xiao was still conscious but his limbs were weak. He could only mutter under his breath, unable to escape. Then, he looked at the perfected Violet Knight 1,000 feet away. His Taoist robe was neat and his hair was neat and tidy. He still had a smile on his face, but he raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. He lowered his head and looked. "Although you rely on many Dharma treasures," he said amiably, "Wei River Lord should only have the cultivation of Shi mystical realm. I don't know what injury he suffered, but his demonic power is almost gone. I've never seen someone who could withstand 2 of my attacks and injure me." Wei River Lord said it well. Meeting a bosom friend in wine and a match in chess is really satisfying. But now I's words still count. Wei River Lord told me where that demoness went and we won't have to fight today. Do you agree? Scales regrew on Li Yunxin's body. He opened and closed them and clouds rose and lingered around him, clanking. He panted heavily 3 times, then took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Again." Taoist Master Violet Knight shook his head slightly and looked at Xiao Xiao. His smile faded a little. "You came to see Wei River Lord last night to report the news. He should have spent the entire night preparing and storing up his energy for today's battle with me. Why did you come so late that he couldn't use his full strength?" The junior colonel was already trembling. Now that he heard Taoist Master Purple Knight ask him this question, it was even more like he was being held by a demon-headed broadsword on his neck. He was so frightened that his soul was about to leave his body. He hastily crawled a few steps towards the Taoist master and prostrated himself on the ground, calling out, "Taoist master, please forgive me. Taoist master, please allow me to report. This lowly one set out last night, but I got lost and only arrived at noon. I didn't know." The Purple Knight Immortal ignored him. He looked at Li Yunxin again. "Then Wei River Dragon King, is he ready to take my attack of Guangxing Mystical Realm?" Li Yunxin raised his hand. "Wait a moment." Then he waved his hand again, and a gust of demonic wind swept up the 9th young master, the pheasant, and the junior colonel, and sent them to the top of the sky. The 9th young master only had time to say, "What are you doing?" before his voice disappeared. The Purple Knight Immortal waited for him to do all this, then smiled and said, "You are a loyal person, afraid that you will affect them. But if you die, where can their cultivation go? Why don't—" Li Yunxin grinned, revealing his sharp fangs. He smiled and said, "Immortal, you are wrong. I'm not sending them away. You are afraid that I will use my true power and hurt them. You are the one attacking. Now it's my turn. Purple Knight Immortal, are you ready to take my attack of Shi Mystical Realm?" The Taoist was stunned at first, then he smiled. "Good. Come." As soon as he finished speaking, the sea surface suddenly broke and huge waves suddenly rose. It was as if someone was stirring up the ocean with a stick. The Wei River Dragon King rose to the sky, grabbed downward with his palm and shouted, "Then, come." The stone pillar he was standing on suddenly jumped up. It was originally huge and long, but in an instant, it shrunk to the size of an ordinary spear and was held in his palm. The stone pillar suddenly disappeared, and the seawater collided with each other. Soon it swelled up as if there was a terrible power that was about to gush out. The next moment the hot magma rushed up with a bang, as if he had pulled out the bottom of the sea. Li Yunxin bathed in the magma, and the long stick in his hand that had transformed from the stone pillar was surrounded by purple lightning and golden light. He shook his left hand again and a green iron chain began to spin in his palm. Each loop was longer than the last, and in the blink of an eye, it had encircled the vast ocean, as if it had turned into an iron cage. Without saying anything, he raised the stick and smashed it. The two were separated by 100 feet. But with this smash, his fiend god body arrived in front of the Purple Knight Immortal in the blink of an eye. But the Immortal was not an ordinary person. There was only a shadow left in his original place, and he was 100 feet away. With their strength and speed, it would be too long to even describe the time it took for the staff to smash down as an instant. However, this staff strike was both fast and slow. The Purple Knight Taoist moved with Li Yunxin. In the time it took to raise the stick and smash it down, thousands of afterimages appeared on the surface of the ocean. It was the Purple Knight Immortal hiding and Wei River Dragon King chasing. It was originally just a fight between two people, but now it seemed like a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. The iron chain obtained from Bai Yanjun also displayed its miraculous effect at this moment. Aiming at the illusory body of the Purple Knight Immortal, it suddenly stabbed out with the chain. If it hit, even if it couldn't take away his soul, it would still make his body stiffen and suffer the hit. But since the Immortal was said to have an attack of the Profound Realm, he was someone who was about to step into the peak of the Profound Realm. Every strike of the iron chain missed and it couldn't trap him. But because of this, the Immortal had no time to use any other methods. In this long and extremely short period of time, Li Yunxin actually had the time to shout again, "Formation complete." When he smashed the Purple Knight Immortal, he left behind many afterimages on the surface of the ocean. If one looked at those afterimages horizontally, they would only appear to be a field of brilliant light. But if one looked down from the sky, one would discover that they actually formed some kind of rhythmic pattern. Following his shout, the afterimages on the surface of the ocean suddenly connected. A clear clanging sound rang out. It was as if the sky and space had frozen. The ocean surface and space where the two of them were suddenly became a flat surface, a painting. This painting was extremely strange. It was clearly a space that had length, width, height, and depth, but one couldn't see how thick it was. Looking at it horizontally, it seemed to disappear between heaven and earth. Looking up, one's gaze seemed to be instantly sucked in. It couldn't go up, couldn't go down, could only flow in all directions. It was as if it existed in space and time, but also as if it was independent. Ordinary vision and perception couldn't describe this kind of experience. If one didn't see it with their own eyes, they really wouldn't be able to imagine it. It was as if the two of them had been drawn into a painting. There was no concept of thickness, only a flat surface. If a person dodged in the vast sky, up and down, front and back, left and right, they could go anywhere. But what if they were on a framed piece of white paper? Now this space had suddenly become a piece of paper, and the frame of this paper was the iron chain that Bai Yanjun had given him. Like a brush drawing lines on a piece of paper, the white paper had to be filled up. The purple knight immortal darted left and right in the painting, while Li Yunxin followed him like a shadow. The illusions left behind by the two of them quickly filled up the canvas. When the purple knight immortal had nowhere to go and couldn't rush to the picture frame iron chain, with a piercing sound, countless Li Yunxin's illusions smashed their long staffs onto the bodies of the purple knight immortal. At this moment, the people who had been swept up by Li Yunxin's monstrous power were still rising up and hadn't fallen. But the painting paper suddenly shattered. Countless fragments intertwined with each other and annihilated into a blinding light. Some splashed into the sea. Once they came into contact with the water, they instantly turned into a bottomless black hole. The seawater was sucked in with a rumble, turning into a terrifying vortex. There were thousands, tens of thousands of such vortexes. In the blink of an eye, the surface of the ocean was sucked clean, revealing the seabed. The surrounding seawater immediately filled up with a roar, surged, and burst forth with a deafening scream. On the boiling surface of the ocean, the two figures separated, still separated by 100 feet. Li Yunxin had returned to his human form. He held a long staff in one hand and an iron chain in the other. His white robe was torn, his hair was disheveled, and there was not a single part of his skin that was intact. It was as if he had been fished out from a sea of blood. The purple knight immortal was still unharmed. But there was no smile on his face, and his face was green. He stood with his hands behind his back and stared straight at Li Yunxin. After 3 breaths, he gritted his teeth and spat out, "What technique is this?" Li Yunxin grinned. The row of fine white teeth on his scarlet face was especially obvious. He shook his left hand and put away the iron chain. He swung his right hand and plunged the stone staff back into the water. Soon it expanded into the stone pillar from before. "This technique is called," he said with a smile, "dimensional reduction strike." Chapter 660. The Purple Knight Taoist frowned. "The name is very strange. This method is unheard of." When he said this, he was slightly out of breath. He was like a mortal who had run a long way and now stopped to speak. "But I know what method you used to return the 2 blows I gave you earlier." He shook his head. "Creating a figure is 1 point, creating 10 million figures in that space is 10 million points. 10 million points of power is added to my body. I have the cultivation of broad life mystery, but I suffered a loss here." He gritted his teeth, but he couldn't hold it in. Finally he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body suddenly withered as if his muscles and bones had been pulled out. "I accepted wholeheartedly. Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin. Your famous name is indeed not in vain." Li Yunxin landed back on the stone pillar. His body shook, scattering the blood. Only then did the golden wound below be revealed. He was naked, but acted as if no one else was watching. He flipped his palm and took out a jade bottle. He took out some ointment and carefully applied it to his wound in front of the Purple Knight Taoist. Only then did it transform into a set of clothes. The Purple Knight Taoist frowned and said in a low voice, "You are a strange person. I haven't met an opponent like you for a long time." After saying this, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Li Yunxin raised his head and looked at him. He tilted his head and thought for a moment. Suddenly he tossed the jade bottle in his hand to him. "You're not bad yourself. This is medicine. Do you still want to fight?" The Purple Knight Taoist caught the bottle. He seemed somewhat surprised, wanting to say something but hesitated. He stared at Li Yunxin for a while, then said, "No. You were seriously injured. You have the cultivation of Shi mystery. But you were able to seriously injure me. I don't know what other methods you have." With our cultivation at this level, if we really want to decide a victor, it will be a matter of life and death. I've been entrusted with a task, so I don't need to sacrifice my life and cultivation. Li Yunxin laughed. Then I think you're a good person. The Purple Knight Taoist raised his hands slightly. We're not friends. They could only be considered enemies who respected each other. Because of your method of hurting me, I'll give you a few words of advice. I have the divine ability of the profound realm of expansive life. But in the lifeless immortal sect, he was not considered to be at the top. Our sect's ancestors' cultivation is profound, it's not something you and I can imagine. You're alone at sea. No matter how brilliant his methods were, he was still just one person. I appreciate your talent, so I advise you to leave the Eastern Sea as soon as possible, or to recruit more helpers. The next time I come, I won't be alone. You can't stop it. As he spoke, he lowered his head and looked at the jade bottle in his palm. After hesitating for a while, he said, Ancestor can see the future. For many years the prophecy had come true. There are powerful enemies in the sea and you will definitely be defeated. Take care of yourself. At this time, the three people who were swept into the sky by Li Yunxin finally landed. Li Yunxin grabbed the pheasant with his left hand and the ninth young master with his right, causing the young master to fall on the stone pillar. Only then did he smile. That's great. Many people want to be friends with me, but you want to distance yourself from them. As for whether I will be defeated or not, he curled his lips. My fate is up to me, not the heavens. The Purple Knight Immortal smiled. He saluted again. Goodbye. As soon as he finished speaking, the figure disappeared. The pheasant was still dizzy. The ninth young master stared at Li Yunxin like a small ferocious beast. But because he had been injured by the pressure of the battle between the two super experts, he was not very fierce now. He could only shout angrily, What do you mean? Why did you throw me away? Can I help? Do I look like I'm afraid of death? The young master also stared at him. He looked at the direction in which the Purple Knight Immortal had escaped, and then looked at Li Yunxin. They had seen the scene of the two fighting in the sky, but now they still wondered if they were dreaming. That immortal? Did he really leave in defeat? Oh my god, how could this Li Yunxin be so terrifying? He got up from the ground and looked at Li Yunxin again. But he found some unusual details. Mortals had to heal themselves when they were injured. Small demons with low cultivation had to do the same. Their demon power was limited. If the situation allowed, it would be less troublesome to let them recover slowly than to spend a lot of effort to use their demon power. But for a super big demon like Li Yunxin, healing his wounds was a piece of cake for them. Big demons had abundant demon power, so the wounds on the surface of their bodies could be easily covered. Even if they had serious internal injuries, they could look as good as new with a shake of their bodies. But now there were wounds on Li Yunxin's hands, face and neck. Although the wounds had disappeared and were not as horrible as before, he still felt something was wrong. But he didn't dare to say anything. Li Yunxin's strength was far beyond his imagination. Lord Donghai told him that Wei River Dragon King was only in the Shi mysterious realm. Although this realm was far beyond Xiao Zhao's reach, he had been with Lord Donghai for many years and had seen many high-level big demons. He knew that the Shi mysterious realm was only the first level of the mysterious realm. The second level was the advanced mysterious realm, and the third level was the broad mysterious realm. Beyond that was the peak of the mysterious realm. Taking another step in the peak was the Taishang Wang Qing. The Purple Knight Immortal was the third level of the mysterious realm, the broad mysterious realm. So when he saw it was him, Xiao Xiao was scared out of his wits. Didn't they say that they would test him first? He would be buried together with him. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? Not only did he not dare to act rashly, but he also didn't dare to ask more questions when he saw Li Yunxin's wounds. Only the ninth young master was still angry and stared at Li Yunxin. But Li Yunxin just smiled. Of course you are no match for him and you can't help him. The ninth young master raised his eyebrows. But then he heard Li Yunxin say, That's why I sent you away. I knew you would die but I still asked you to stay. Friends don't do that. This sentence made the ninth young master's anger dissipate by half. When he saw Li Yunxin sitting on the ground and closing his eyes to regulate his breath, his anger dissipated by half. The Baji at the peak of the true realm stamped his feet. Alas, alas. It's all my fault. Pheasant blinked his eyes. It seemed that he couldn't believe that these words came from the ninth young master's mouth. However, Li Yunxin didn't say anything. He had already meditated. He meditated for a whole day. During this time, the wounds on his face and hands slowly healed, leaving only shallow white marks. These white marks were like the scars of mortals. It would probably take a few days for them to fade away. When he woke up again, he found the 3 demons in front of him. It seemed that they were protecting him. It was still a sunny day, but the sea had become the Yellow Sea. The battle with the Purple Knight Immortal had swept up all the mud from the bottom of the sea. It would take a long time for a pool of muddy water to clear, let alone a vast ocean. Li Yunxin was once impressed by Kun Wuzi's means of overturning Dong Ting. But now he also had this kind of power. He breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. How long has it been? 24 hours. The 9th young master frowned and looked at him seriously. Are you badly hurt? The junior colonel was tied to the same rope with Li Yunxin at this time. He was shocked by Li Yunxin's strength. Therefore he was eager to flatter Li Yunxin and said hurriedly, Dragon King has made a great achievement by repelling the Purple Knight Immortal of the Guangxing Mystery State. It doesn't matter if you are badly hurt. It's still glorious to be hurt. Li Yunxin looked at him. He should be more badly hurt than me. After saying this, he ignored the dumbfounded junior colonel and stood up. But this person from the lifeless immortal school is really hard to deal with. It's weird. He has the shadow of Taoism and Shenmen when he fights. He is not like those perverts who abandon their feelings and desires. He is a normal person with feelings and desires. Compared with the cultivators of the Shenmen of the same level, he is also more powerful. Old ancestor of 10,000 years, interesting. He looked at the junior colonel again. How many people like him are there? The junior colonel said hurriedly, as far as I know, he is the only one in the ocean. Dragon King can seriously hurt him. Other people must be no match for him. Well, if they come one by one. Well, what will your master do? Dragon King, wait a moment. The junior colonel carefully took out a conch from his arms. He smiled at Li Yunxin and then at the 9th young master. He turned around awkwardly and put the conch on his ear. The 9th young master curled his lips. We have a lot of treasures. I don't care about your stupid thing. The junior colonel smiled and nodded while listening. After listening for a while, he turned around in a daze. Li Yunxin was not in a hurry, but the 9th young master and Pheasant were anxious. What's wrong? Say it. The junior colonel looked at Li Yunxin. Say that the Purple Knight Immortal was seriously injured. His spirit left his body and went back to the Shenmen sect. Dragon King. You killed him. He beat him to death. After a long silence, Lord Donghai said. The hall that used to be worshipped by the ministers was now empty, with only 8 people. Lord Donghai was one and there were 7 others. The Dragon Kings on the sea gathered together, waiting for the news from the Purple Knight Immortal. In the morning, under the persuasion of Lord Donghai, the Dragon Kings who had just arrived finally reached an agreement. They asked the Purple Knight Immortal to kill the arrogant Dragon King of the land. They wanted to see how capable he was so that they could decide what to do next. Because the Dragon Kings also wanted to save face. Although the 9 Dragon Kings occupied a large area of water. Similar to the land, there were always some unruly big demons in the territory. They were nominally attached but in fact they were independent. For the sake of the Dragon King of the land, they sent out all the elite troops. Even if they won easily, they would cause trouble and be looked down upon. In the end, after much discussion, they decided not to send their own people, but asked the Purple Knight Immortal of the Lifeless Immortal sect to go. After the Purple Knight Immortal left, the 7 Dragon Kings thought that maybe the Immortal could subdue Li Yunxin. They didn't have to worry. On the other hand, Lord Donghai was worried about what he should do next if such a situation really happened. But the news was, the Purple Knight Immortal was seriously injured. He forced himself to return to Penglai Island and immediately meditated in the quiet room to heal. But the injury was too serious. After 4 hours of rest, he had to immortalize his body and save his spirit. He immediately went to the Lifeless Immortal sect. Hearing this news, the 8 Dragon Kings were silent for a quarter of an hour. Chapter 661. Only the Dragon King of the East Sea was in a different mood. The 7 of them were completely shocked. There was also joy in his surprise. This way, it would be easier for him to do things. That Li Yunxin really didn't disappoint him, at least not now. Right now, the stronger he was, the happier the East Sea Dragon King was. After saying this, he stood up and paced around the hall. He paced a few steps in the hall. This is no small matter. Brothers, we have to be careful. As he said this, he observed the reactions of the Dragon King. The West Sea Dragon King was killed, and his true body is still missing. I'm next to him and I want to find him and support him until I die, but I can't find him. So, A few days ago, almost 10,000 people were killed by Li Yunxin and that demonic woman, and we have already lost a lot of face. Not to mention all of you, even some of the demon kings here are starting to get restless. This matter can't be tolerated anymore. In my opinion, we have to send an army and kill this scourge as soon as possible. Lord Vast, what do you think? Like the dragon son on land, the 9 dragon kings on the sea had different natures. The dragon king of the East Sea and the dragon king of the West Sea had similar natures, and they were close to each other. But just like in the human world, as long as there was class and interest involved, there would be discord. The Dragon Island was protected by 3 immortal mountains. They were Penglai, Ingzhou, and Square Pot. The Dragon King of the East Sea was in charge of Penglai, the Dragon King of the West Sea was in charge of Ingzhou, and the Dragon King of the North Sea was in charge of Square Pot. The remaining 6 Dragon Kings were in charge of the 6 wild seas. This wild was the wild in the sense of wild. Among the 6 Dragon Kings, the Dragon King of the vast sea had the largest territory and the most abundant resources. The Dragon King's temperament was also the most arrogant and unruly. It was said that he often said in his dragon palace that the vast sea was equal to the West Sea plus the East Sea. My cultivation is also a bit higher than those 2, why should I ask them to guard Imperial Dragon Island? As a result, he was indignant and had a bad relationship with the 3 island-guarding Dragon King. Actually, this was quite normal. The ruler always has a way to control his subordinates. He told Jindao Dragon King to be slightly weaker, and Wild Sea Dragon King to be slightly stronger so that they would not fight with each other, but also to ensure that they would not work together to oppose him. This was the reason why the Lord of the Eastern Sea asked the Boundless Dragon King instead of anyone else. The vast Dragon King thought highly of himself. Other than the Divine Lords, no one else was convinced. Although Li Yunxin had actually killed Taoist Master Purple Knight, who was at the Profound Realm, the vast Dragon King did not like the people of the Lifeless Immortal sect. As long as one didn't experience it personally, it was difficult to empathize. Moreover, he looked down on Lord Donghai. When Lord Donghai asked him, he knew what he would say. Humph. Lord Donghai, do you want us to be laughed at again? The vast Sea Lord had a square head and a square brain. It was said that his true form was a very fierce fish in the deep sea. His eyes were small, his nostrils were big, and his mouth was also big. When he heard Lord Donghai's question, he felt that this brother wanted to make an example out of him. He, who had always been at odds with him, was suppressed by him and had no choice but to agree. There was no more suspense in this matter. But he did not want to do so. He leaned back on the chair. Those bastards from the land, do they deserve to be called the Dragon King? What happened to the 10,000 people just now? Hey, a bunch of mobs. Without a unified command, without a commander, they won't be defeated. He spread his hands, tilted his head, and looked around at everyone. Who will be defeated? That Taoist Master Purple Knight? Hey, the Lifeless Immortal sect is independent of our 9 seas. That 10,000-year-old ancestor is said to have learned the skills of the land, which is even more incompatible with us. When I asked him to go, I didn't agree. Who knows if he colluded with those bastards from the land? Now he's dead? Hey, who saw with their own eyes how he died and how he was injured? Who saw? He spread his hands again. I think there's something fishy. That's not all, brothers. He got excited as he spoke and stood up. Lord Donghai frowned. But he didn't say anything. He just walked to his seat and sat down looking helpless. Think about where that Li Yunxin came from in the beginning. The East Sea. He turned to look at Lord Donghai and sneered. We all know. It's said that the Divine Lord summoned him. But he didn't give him a way to enter the Dragon Island, so he came to the East Sea. Lord Donghai said that he wanted to replace us. He's new here and he's also in the mysterious realm. Can he rule the 9 seas alone? Do you think we're stupid? What he wants is your East Sea, right? Lord Donghai's face darkened and he stood up abruptly. Lord Houhan waved his hand. You have nothing to feel guilty about. What's wrong with listening to me? For example, let's say that the Divine Lord thinks that you, Lord Donghai, are not easy to command, so he wants to replace you with this Li Yunxin. You want to kill him but you can't. Don't look at me like that. Am I right? We all know that Li Yunxin fought with you and he came to your Penglai Island to show off and then left. So he wants us to do this with you. If we really get involved, who will protect us if we anger the Divine Lord? Am I right, brothers? 3 Dragon King nodded. The other 2 whispered to each other. Lord Donghai couldn't help but stand up and said, Get involved? Didn't you all agree to ask the Purple Knight Taoist to go? If he wanted to get involved, he would have done it long ago. Lord Houhan Dragon King sneered again. Ah, that doesn't count. It's the lifeless immortal sect that got involved. It has nothing to do with us. Lord Donghai, if you want us to help, you have to let us feel at ease. What did the Divine Lord say to you? What did he say? Let's hear it. Humph. If you don't believe me, you can ask the Divine Lord yourself, Lord Donghai said in a deep voice. The Divine Lord is powerful. Maybe she is listening to what we are talking about here. If you are not afraid that the Divine Lord will think that you don't know how to do things, feel free to ask her again. I have said before that this Li Yunxin is just a fish that stirred up trouble. We have been at ease for too long, so the Divine Lord sent him to train us. On land he colluded with the Rock King. You all know a little about what happened on land recently. Did I lie to you? Would the Divine Lord let this kind of person take charge of East Sea and Penglai? Lord Haohan, you and I don't get along. But at this time you are throwing a tantrum. He slammed the armrest. You don't know what's good for you. Lord Haohan Dragon King stared at him, his eyes shining. You scold me? Who do you think I am? Those useless soldiers and crab generals on your island? Bah. Your people are a bunch of cowards and you want us to stand up for you? Ah, what a joke. Go take care of your own business. Lord Donghai stood up abruptly, took 2 steps forward and scolded, How dare you act wildly in my territory? How dare you, a thing that eats mud at the bottom of the sea, act wildly in my territory? Then he turned around and pointed at the remaining 5 Dragon Kings, widened his eyes and yelled, Fine, you don't want to get involved? Fine, I don't care about this anymore. I have always wanted to live in seclusion with my beauties, and be a happy hermit like the ancestor 10,000 years ago. I don't want East Sea anymore, I don't want Penglai anymore. Go ahead and cause trouble. Let's see if you can still protect the East Sea without me. Whoever wants to go can go. Lord Haohan yelled, Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I'm not afraid of you. The 2 Dragon Kings were about to walk out, but East Sea Dragon King's footsteps were fast and big. Lord Haohan was taller than him, but he walked slower, so he fell behind him. When Lord Donghai walked out of the hall, everyone knew that he was really going to leave. They hurriedly stood up and pulled Lord Donghai and Lord Haohan. After some kind words they finally stopped. The 2 Dragon Kings sat on the chairs with gloomy faces, and neither said a word. North Sea Dragon King looked like a white-bearded grandpa with white hair and beard. He probably liked this look when he transformed. His temperament was also similar to his appearance, a bit mature and prudent. Seeing that everyone was silent, he coughed and began to smooth things over. Everyone, how nice it is to be amiable, Lord Donghai, about this, it's not necessary, He waved his hand. It's not necessary to deceive everyone, The immortal Lord is watching, how can he not know? If you ask me, He stroked his white beard, waved his hand again and frowned. Our elites are all here, it's embarrassing. But, with fewer people this, is not enough, right? No one liked to listen to him before. It was slow and slow. In the time it took for him to say 1 sentence, others could say 3. But now no one was willing to make a sound. Lord Donghai's words, actions, and anger convinced them that he was not deceiving them. In fact, they were just a little suspicious. Lord Donghai and Lord Beihai were right. Shinryu was omnipotent, and Penglai Island was the gateway to Dragon Island. How could Shinryu not know that the 8 Dragon Kings were gathered together? If what Lord Donghai said was false, the immortal Lord would have raged long ago. His silence before was somewhat similar to Lord Haohan's. But there had to be a sense of propriety. If they really messed things up, who would come out of it well? Lord Beihai said again, In my opinion, let's do it this way. Let's lead 2 armies. Go with the elites, go with the general. Fight steadily, Venerable Zai, didn't you pass on the message? Say that Li Yunxin, set up a formation and guarded the eye of the formation. That's because he knows he's weak, and needs to wait for reinforcements. What about our 2 armies? 1 army, guard against Zhouhai. The other army surround him, fight slowly. Grind, Lord Beihai spread his hands, grind slowly. Grind his formation, then grind his people. This immortal lord, he stopped and cupped his hands in front of his face as if he was sure that Shinryu was listening. He wants to train us. What? I thought, it's also because we usually, cause discord among the brothers, this is outrageous. Using this as an excuse to unite us, Lord Donghai leaned back and sneered, I still say the same thing. My people won't go, whoever wants to go can go. My people. He looked at Lord Haohan from the corner of his eyes. What's the use of shrimp soldiers and crab generals? How can they compare to the vast sea, vast? Rich, strong troops and strong horses. Every one of them is a hero. One of them is equivalent to 3 of my people. The vast sea army captured that land mixed hair. I can't help it, alive. Lord Howhan slapped the armrest and stood up. Who are you chanting to? Chapter 662. He narrowed his eyes at Lord Donghai and sneered. Do I not know what you are thinking? Do you know that Li Yunxin is difficult to deal with and you are trying to provoke him? Even if he suffers a loss, he will still cut us down one by one. Haha, fine, I will call you Rui, Lord Beihai. I will personally lead an army. Let him see if his troops are really shrimp soldiers or crab generals. Lord Beihai frowned and waved his hand. Alas, alas, there is no need to be impulsive. But Lord Howhan had already stood up. He glared at Lord Donghai and strode out of the hall. The other 6 looked at each other. Lord Beihai stroked his beard. Then, who will cut off the reinforcement army? No one said a word. Lord Donghai sneered again. He pointed outside the hall. Our Lord Howhan, humph, do you think he is really reckless? Isn't he the first to take the task of encircling and suppressing Li Yunxin and leave it to us? Li Yunxin is in the mysterious realm of Shi and can kill the Purple Knight spiritual master with formations. But his reinforcement, that female monster, should be at the peak of the mysterious realm. Aha, he left this dangerous task to us, which makes us look cowardly, and he is brave. Isn't that why he made such a scene just now? Ah. Seeing that he was talking again, Lord Beihai lowered his head, as if he had fallen asleep and stopped talking. The other 4 didn't speak either and just nodded in agreement with Lord Donghai. But none of them volunteered either. Lord Donghai sighed and stood up. Alas, since that mud-eater is gone, I will not be angry with you. After all, this is a matter of the East Sea. I will lead this army. Hearing this, Lord Beihai seemed to wake up again. Alas, alas, this, Lord Donghai, you are really responsible. Lord Donghai sneered and strode out of the hall. By now it was already night. The sky was full of bright stars and there was a slight chill outside the hall. At the same time, Li Yunxin was sitting on a stone pillar to heal himself. Lord Donghai left the hall, lingered around for a while, and then went straight to Huang Guanzi's residence. When he was outside the hall, his face was still full of anger. It was as if he was angry that his brothers weren't united and that they weren't able to send out their elites. But as soon as he entered Huang Guanzi's courtyard, the anger on his face disappeared and was replaced by happiness. As soon as she entered the bamboo gate, she called out, "Mister, do you still have the thin scales from last time? Do you have any wine? I'll use poison." Huang Guanzi came out of the bamboo house to welcome him. He looked at Donghai Jun and smiled. Is it done? Lord Donghai clapped his hands and laughed. It's done, it's done, it's done. Not only did he succeed, he even asked that mud-eating guy to surround Li Yunxin. Haha, this kind of boorish fellow, is he qualified to play mind games with me? I'll play him in the palm of my hand. He was inspired. As he sat down on the stone bench, he excitedly recounted what had happened in the hall. In the end he laughed and said, "Then the one who eats mud he must suffer." Even if Li Yunxin couldn't kill him, he had to severely injure his army. Haha, that's what he gets for swaggering around and not even putting me in his eyes. Where's the fish? Huang Guanzi smiled. The weather is not good. I didn't catch it today. Lord Donghai was in high spirits. Where's the wine? I only want wine. A pot of warm moonlight wine. Huang Guanzi said lightly, My lord is already drunk. Why do you still want wine? Lord Donghai was stunned. He stared at him for a long time before he opened his mouth. I was too proud. You're right. I don't deserve to be taught a lesson. Huang Guanzi sat down in front of him and waved his hand. A cup of green tea appeared on the stone table. I just want to remind my lord, besides Red Lady, there's still the owner of Southernwood Jew. We previously interrogated the spy of Southernwood Jew and know that the owner of Southernwood Jew is coming. If your army meets both of them at the same time, how will you deal with them? Lord Donghai was in a good mood. He raised his hand and walked on the stone table with his index and middle fingers. I'll run as soon as I see them. I didn't eat the meat of that Lord Dongting. I didn't offend the owner of Southernwood Jew. What can they do to me if they protect me? Huang Guanzi smiled and shook his head. My lord, if you really see them you don't have to run. You just need to sit on the mountain and watch them fight. Lord Donghai frowned. Oh? Tell me in detail, master. Huang Guanzi cleared his throat and said in a low voice, Red Lady's father is Lord Dongting. Lord Dongting is also an affectionate person. He came to Dragon Island and his whereabouts are unknown. Human Dao was dead, but a fiendish demon who had mastered mystical realm would not die without a sound. I guess he had a disagreement with Lord Donghai and was detained on Dragon Island. Lord Donghai has 9 sons on the land. King Rock has a high level of cultivation. Why is old Lord Dongting the only one left? There's a deep meaning. He won't be killed easily. Red Lady is capricious and impulsive. But after these days she should understand that her lord's father is probably on Dragon Island. He must want to go to Dragon Island. That's why she helped Li Yunxin. Maybe she wants Li Yunxin to take her there. Let's talk about Moon Anju. I came to Dragon King for Li Yunxin. It's for the entrance to the netherworld. Although Moon Anju has always been my enemy, he won't act impulsively for his own benefit. Then Moon Anju's people first went to Penglai Island and tried to get close to Lord Donghai, and then Moon Anju's master came personally. I'm afraid they are after something big. They have always been active on the land. Now they are also coming here and want to befriend Dragon King. What? It must be for the entrance to the netherworld. So, Huang Guanzi smiled calmly, they all want to go to Dragon Island. And the Dragon Kings on the sea, especially the 3 island guarding Dragon Kings, are the key to go to Dragon Island. Lord Shihai has been mistakenly killed by Red Lady. Only Lord Donghai and Lord Beihai are left. Lord Beihai is cunning and not as magnanimous as Lord Donghai. If you want to take advantage of someone, do you want to take advantage of the magnanimous or the cunning? Lord Donghai blinked. You? Forget it. Tell me more. Huang Guanzi cupped his hands and apologized, so they will not harm Lord Donghai. On the contrary, Red Lady is in love with Li Yunxin. She has the mentality of a little girl and is very overbearing. Hearing this, Lord Donghai sighed. Sigh? If Madame Mingyue is also, Huang Guanzi coughed, Lord Donghai, that Moon Anju's master has been giving Li Yunxin a lot of help on the land, but she has also used him. Once Red Lady meets such a girl and sees that she is also very outstanding, how can she not be jealous? She is a demoness after all, different from humans. There is no reason to reason with her. Maybe the 2 of them will fight. At that time, when the 2 of them fight, Lord Donghai only needs to command an army and watch from afar. Once the winner is decided, he will lead them to Li Yunxin. At that time, Huang Guanzi laughed. Didn't Lord Donghai want Lord Haohan to die? Then he will definitely die. He is picky, but he doesn't know that he is picking a dead end. Lord Donghai was silent for a while, then slapped the table heavily. Wonderful. Meow. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Haha, getting Mr. is like getting a treasure. Wonderful. He called out in anger, then frowned. Wait a minute. Mr., I have lured one of them over. They have defeated Lord Haohan. But what if the rest of us can't control them? What should we do? Huang Guanzi smiled calmly. Lord Donghai worries too much. There is still the Immortal Lord and the Lifeless Immortal Sect. I don't know what the Lifeless Immortal Sect is planning, but since they have been operating on the ocean for tens of thousands of years, they will definitely not sit by and watch the enemy invade. Moreover, this is the worst-case scenario. Moon Anju's master is able to fight with me for so long, she must have something extraordinary. I guess she will carefully control the situation, make it go in your favor. At that time she may still find Lord Donghai. I only hope that at that time, Lord Donghai will remember my hard work. Lord Donghai waved his hand. Don't say that. One should not be hesitant in doing things. I will not let Mr. down. The 2 talked like this for the whole night. For example, the military system under Lord Haohan's command, how many demon generals he had, what kind of abilities he had, where he might march from and what kind of means he might use, they all made deductions. Lord Donghai knew about it, but Huang Guanzi seemed to be more familiar with it. The 2 talked for the whole night, but neither of them felt tired. Instead, they were in high spirits. After a long time of daybreak, an object in Lord Donghai's robe began to vibrate. He waved his hand and the 9th young master's voice came from the void. We have a lot of treasures. I don't care about your broken things. He paused for a moment, then said to Huang Guanzi, those are my people. After that, he didn't say anything. After confirming the identity of the junior colonel, he told him everything he had discussed with Huang Guanzi. He was a profound realm demon lord, and he had experienced Li Yunxin's power. Therefore, although he was surprised that the Purple Knight Taoist was killed by Li Yunxin, it was not to the extent that he was shocked. But he didn't know that his words had scared the junior colonel so much that he couldn't speak. After telling the 9th young master about it and taking back his listening conch, he couldn't speak for a long time. He just stared at Li Yunxin as if he were looking at some terrible beast. Li Yunxin glanced at him indifferently. Oh, is he dead? That's reasonable. I spent so much effort. It's not right if I didn't kill him. What a pity. What else did he say? The junior colonel seemed to wake up from a dream. He hurriedly told him what Lord Donghai had said. In the end he said timidly, "My lord also said that the boundless army will come next time. He knows that Dragon King's cultivation is profound. He can disguise himself with the art of painting, which can't be seen through by ordinary techniques. Please, Dragon King, help me change my appearance in case of trouble." Li Yunxin frowned as he listened to him. At this time he fell into a thoughtful silence. Then he said, "Your lord seems to know the art of painting very well." The junior colonel hurriedly said, "There is a master around my lord. It is said that he knows some painting methods. It should be that master who gave my lord the idea." "Oh, a master." Li Yunxin nodded. "Is he from the Freemasonry or Munanju?" The junior colonel was stunned. Dragon King has a good foresight. He is a master of the Freemasonry. It is said that he used to be one of the 6 elders in charge of the Wanyu Miluo cave of the 18 heavens of Daotong. His Taoist name is Huang Guanzi. Dragon King came from the land. You should have heard of him, right? Li Yunxin thought for a while and laughed. "Oh, of course I have heard of him. When I was in Yunshan I destroyed their lair. There is a list of the masters of the past generations in it. I have heard of him, ha. *****. Note 1. This quote comes from Lin Qingxuan's essay, A Pot of Wine Under the Moonlight. Chapter 663. Ever since Li Yunxin defeated the Purple Knight Immortal, he had been acting like a master. He didn't take credit or be arrogant. He was so calm as if he was just swatting a fly. He was also calm and cool when he heard the words of Lord Donghai. But when he said these words he suddenly smiled. His mouth was smiling but his eyes were not curved. It was a fake smile but not a smile. The junior colonel had seen a lot of moodiness of big demons. Seeing his smile, he was shocked and almost jumped out of his throat. He hurriedly said, "Dragon King? I didn't say anything wrong. I know that the Dragon King and the Freemasonry have always been at odds. But I thought that since we're cooperating with the Lord now." Li Yunxin waved his hand and smiled. "Do I blame you?" "What? Don't you see I'm smiling?" "Ninth young master. Am I smiling?" The 9th young master stared at him and frowned. "You are angry." Li Yunxin suddenly stopped smiling. He snorted, "Let's get to work." The 9th young master was confused. He looked around and then at Li Yunxin. What to do? Li Yunxin suddenly became irritable. "Do what you should do, go play somewhere. I, Dragon King, am going to set up a formation." After saying this he jumped into the sea and disappeared. The 3 people on the stone pillar looked at each other and didn't know what happened to him. After a while, the 9th young master also jumped into the sea to find Li Yunxin and asked Pheasant to keep an eye on the junior colonel. The junior colonel smiled bitterly and said that he was tied to a rope and couldn't run away. In fact, he wanted to say, "He is no match for me even if he wants to run away." But he swallowed his words halfway. He remembered that Li Yunxin killed the Purple Knight Immortal with the cultivation of Shi mysterious realm. These Lu people were all monsters. Who knew what kind of unexpected ability this chicken spirit had? However, the chicken spirit, it seems that there are a few chickens in the town of Penglai Island. He makes up his mind that if he survives this time and becomes the general of the left, he will see if those chickens can become Taoists. Just like this Way River Dragon King, having a chicken spirit as his follower was also a very impressive thing. Speaking of which, that Way River Dragon King Li Yunxin was indeed admirable. As soon as he thought of this, he hurriedly spat twice. He felt that he had been disloyal to his Jun Shang. Shanji looked at him vigilantly. "Who are you spitting on?" The junior colonel widened his eyes and smiled apologetically. "I said the wrong thing." The 9th young master searched for the whole afternoon. Finally he saw Li Yunxin in a strait. Li Yunxin said that he was setting up a formation but in fact he was not doing anything. He stood alone at the bottom of the gorge. The strait was not wide and only 2 people could walk side by side. Li Yunxin had obviously been standing there for quite a while. The mud that had been stirred up by him had fallen back down, covering his body, head and face. If it were not for the monster power that he did not conceal, the 9th young master would think that he was a puppet on a sunken ship. He hurriedly landed and pushed away the mud around him with his supernatural power. He frowned and blew a series of bubbles from his mouth. He patted on Li Yunxin's body twice. "Why did you make yourself a mud monkey? It's so dirty." Li Yunxin was silent for a while. He gently pushed away his hand and sighed, "Which part of me is not dirty?" The ninth young master stared at him suspiciously. "What's wrong with you?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while again. Ninth young master. "Let me ask you, when you first knew that your father was the Lord Dongting and that you were actually a key to the inhibition of Dongting, how did you feel?" The ninth young master blinked. "How did I feel? How could I feel? Monsters are like this. You eat me, I eat you. The powerful bully the weak. How could I feel?" He paused after saying this. It seemed that he knew that such an answer did not satisfy Li Yunxin. He scratched his head. "I was angry. I'll take revenge when I become powerful." "Oh, but he was also my father. Didn't you say that he was actually protecting me, father?" Li Yunxin said softly. "Is he trustworthy?" The ninth young master was stunned for a while. Suddenly he frowned again. "Ah, you found your father?" Li Yunxin raised his hand and wiped his face. He wiped the mud off his face. He said that the Freemason beside King Donghai was Huang Guanzi, one of the 6 elders in charge of the Wanyu Luo cave in the 18 paradises of Daotong. "I've heard of this name. I didn't see it on a directory in Yunshan." Speaking of this, Li Yunxin reached out and picked out the red dot between his eyebrows. He held it in his palm. "I heard it from Li Chunfeng." "Li Chunfeng? To me he is like Lord Dongting to you," Li Yunxin said lightly. "I mentioned it to you." The ninth young master realized something and stopped talking. He also mentioned the art. How many people in the world know the art? Li Yunxin stood still for a moment and shook his head. "After I left Dingzhou there were many surprises along the way, but it was not dangerous. When I was in danger there was always a force to help me, so that I could barely get through it. I used to think that I was too capable. But I slowly realized that no matter how capable I am, there will be times when I make mistakes. This time I came to Donghai to provoke King Donghai to cooperate with me and fight against those Dragon King. I said something and he went back and thought about it. He believed me and agreed. It was not difficult. I thought it was because I was more capable. But now that I think about it, the Donghai Dragon King should not have been so easily fooled. You should know that I had planned to do this in half a month." The ninth young master's eyes widened. "That Freemason is your father? Not dead. Helping you? Not dead." Li Yunxin revealed a slight cold smile. "I have both parents now. Then I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing." The ninth young master muttered, What are you going to do?" Li Yunxin was silent for a moment. You and I are actually very similar. We are also in someone else's plan. We can't get away." The ninth young master shook his head. No, I owe you a favor. Haven't I already gotten away? You will sooner or later." But Li Yunxin interrupted him. "Ninth young master, you should go." "Go?" The ninth young master thought for a moment. "All right, I'll go up first. You should be alone." This is such bad luck. No one would be happy about it. I mean, you should leave Donghai. Find a place to hide on the land. With your current cultivation and the treasure I gave you, you should be able to protect yourself." The ninth young master originally turned around. He suddenly turned around. "What do you mean?" But Li Yunxin looked at him calmly. "You never got away. Under Yunshan, I promised to give you a new body in order to coax you to give me the translucent jade scroll. There is something in it that can help me control the mother plate of heaven and earth. In Yunshan, I used a scale of the Shinryu to sculpt your body. In fact, part of the reason was to find out the methods of the art saint, so I used you as a test subject. And it worked. Once it worked, I didn't want to alert the Shinryu. Shinryu's clone came to Yunshan and made a deal with me." Li Yunxin spoke at a moderate pace. The ninth young master heard it clearly. He stared at him at first, then slowly frowned. After that, his brows relaxed. He stared straight at Li Yunxin, as if he had returned to the temple on that rainy night and met him for the first time. Li Yunxin did not avoid his gaze. "I sculpted your body, which is equivalent to sculpting a portion of dragon energy out of thin air. You are the incarnation of the Shinryu, so you can't harm her. As for our Shinryu, she has lost a lot of her power due to some reason. Now she is eager to become stronger. I have this method so she can use it. I brought you here to bring you to the Shinryu. She absorbs your power to become stronger so I can create more beings like you for her to use. You were part of our plan from the beginning to the end. You are a consumable. You have never been able to escape. Just like me. Now you understand," Li Yunxin said. "You can go." The two of them looked at each other for a while. The ninth young master suddenly approached him with a serious expression. He looked at the Shinryu's blood in his hand and said in a low voice, "There is someone nearby, isn't there? I know you are trying to trick me again." "It's true." The ninth young master. The ninth young master looked at him suspiciously. He took 2 steps back and laughed. "Then you must be joking with me." "Ah." Li Yunxin looked at him silently. He shook his head slightly. The ninth young master did not say anything. "Then I will kill you." He suddenly became furious and punched Li Yunxin in the chest. There was a loud bang. Due to the terrifying power, a huge bubble appeared next to the two of them. The strait was shattered by the power, and the gorge became a basin. The seawater surged wildly, and the terrible shock spread out in all directions. The seabed, which was already fragile due to the battle with the Purple Knight enlightened, shook violently. Everything that had just calmed down was thrown back into the sea. Li Yunxin took the punch, but his body did not move. He did not even take a step back. He shook his head calmly. "You can't kill me. You can go." The ninth young master punched him in the chest again. Mist rose around him and he roared like a beast. "Why did you tell me? Why did you tell me? Isn't it good to let me die like this?" Li Yunxin grabbed the ninth young master's 4th punch. Even the furious Lord Tongtian could not break free from the power of a mystic realm demon. He punched again with his other hand, but Li Yunxin caught his other hand. "No." He looked at the ninth young master's eyes. "Because we are friends." "Friends?" The ninth young master showed his fangs, and his eyes flashed with cruelty. "I have never had any friends. I see you as a friend now." Li Yunxin pushed the ninth young master 3 steps away. "Take Shanji away. If I still deserve your forgiveness." The ninth young master was about to pounce on him. However, after taking a heavy step forward, he paused again. "Of course I will take him away." He gritted his teeth and said, "If I can't kill you, I will tear him apart." "Ah, you can fight with your father here." "Aha, now you know he is scheming against you." "Aha, I will wait to see how you fight on land." "Ah." "I won't fight with him." Li Yunxin smiled. "Sheng Guanyu is also in the East Sea." "Ah." "I wanted to save her. But she and he are with the Lord of the East Sea." "Ah." "I won't fight with them." Li Yunxin let out a sigh. "I will let them go. Let's see if they want me to die too." The ninth young master looked at him in the clouds like a poisonous snake about to pounce on him. "Ah. Ah. Ah. Who knows if you are telling the truth?" "Ah. Okay, you stay here. Just wait. I will come back for you sooner or later. I will settle the scores with you one by one." "Settle the scores." There was a loud bang. The demon at the peak of the true realm suddenly jumped out. Li Yunxin was still motionless. After a long time, the sand in the sea fell again and covered him again. He opened his mouth slightly and made a sound like a breeze. Family reunion. When night fell, Li Yunxin returned to the stone pillar, dripping wet. The junior colonel didn't leave. He seemed to be at a loss. When he saw Li Yunxin, he hurried to greet him. "Dragon King." Li Yunxin waved his hand. "Did he say anything?" The junior colonel was stunned for a while before he guessed what he was thinking. "Dragon King. If you are asking about the Lord Tongtun?" He rushed up wrapped in a cloud of mist and took that person away. He seemed to say, "Let's go," and nothing else. I don't think he said it to me, so I didn't dare to follow him. "Dragon King, what's the plan next?" Li Yunxin raised her hand and waved it in the air. Immediately, Xiao Zhao's appearance changed into that of a pheasant. Then he nodded and sat down by the reef. He sat facing the bright moon for the whole night. Chapter 664. When the east wind blew and the war drums sounded, the army of the Dragon King of the vast sea rushed over. Li Yunxin stood up. He sat alone for the whole night, not daring to say a word. Now that he saw the soldiers and flags surging over the sea, he panicked. He used to be on the opposite side, but now he was beside Li Yunxin. Perhaps the Wei River Dragon King had gotten used to the feeling of challenging the whole world alone, but he obviously hadn't. So he mustered up the courage to ask in a low voice, "Dragon King, do we have any rules?" Li Yunxin's clothes were already dry. He stood with his hands behind his back, his clothes fluttering in the wind, but his voice was as calm as a pool of stagnant water. There was before. He slowly raised his hand and pressed the red dot on his forehead again, but now there isn't. Let's leave it to fate and see if we live or die. The small commander was stunned for a while, then he said in a trembling voice, "Dragon King, you must be joking." Li Yunxin glanced at him indifferently. "Oh." From afar, looking at Li Yunxin and the stone pillar he was standing on, it was like looking at a black dot and a tiny speck of dust on it. But Lord Boundless did not doubt the power of that speck of dust. But he was not afraid. He had shown his reckless side in the hall of Lord Donghai, but it was just a facade. It was impossible for a boorish man to rule over the vast ocean, which had the widest territory. It was also impossible for him to command the soldiers under his command wholeheartedly. Now he was in charge of the rear army, surrounded by his generals, and had already surrounded the stone pillar where Li Yunxin was. This time, a total of 30,000 soldiers were sent, all of them elites. Wherever the army passed, there was nothing left, and all the fish and shrimps were hunted. This was a convenience that could not be found on land. Everywhere the army went was a granary, and there was no need to worry about logistics. He did not advance rashly. He only surrounded the water within 100 miles of the stone pillar and sent out the necromancers from the lifeless immortal sect who followed the army. These necromancers were also cultivators, but they were far more adept at arrays than ordinary cultivators. Now, under the protection of several vanguard troops, more than a dozen necromancers were cautiously approaching the edge of the formation set up by Li Yunxin, as reported by the immortal Zai, to survey the area. The leader of these necromancers was a middle-aged man. He was strong and had some stubble on his chin. In the eyes of the mainlanders, he was a middle-aged man who was almost 30 years old. His Taoist name was Qin Fengzi. Qin Fengzi was only at the peak of the transcendent state. But standing on the water stage next to Lord Vast Expanse, his aura was not weak at all. His expression was calm and indifferent. Aside from Lord Boundless, he was accompanied by a few profound realm and a dozen true realm demon generals. But even so, he didn't feel uncomfortable. The cultivators of the lifeless immortal sect could be considered to be transcendent existences in the sea. Even though Lord Vast Expanse did not like them, it did not change. It was just that the atmosphere was a little subtle. While the army was waiting for the necromancers to survey, the two did not speak. Half an hour later, when the necromancers returned to hand in their orders, Qin Fengzi bowed slightly and said, "Lord, I have some ideas." Lord Vast Expanse sat on a glorious throne carried by 16 demon soldiers. After hearing his words, he said after a while, "Oh, tell me about it." Qin Fengzi paused and said, "The immortal Zai is right. With that stone pillar as the center, there is an array within 100 miles of the sea. If it wasn't for the Shenmen Daotong and Kenzo, we would not have known the details." But the immortal Zai had already used the golden silk entanglement spell to survey the area. He knew that the array was an endless one that could absorb the injured. To put it in words that ordinary people can understand, it is like, we attack with 10% of our power, he can block 70% of it, and the array absorbs 30%. The immortal Zai used 2 killing moves, both of which he took head-on and stored the power. Then he used other methods to return the power 100 times, 1,000 times. That was why the immortal was heavily injured. "He's dead." Lord Vast Expanse interrupted, "How do we break the array?" "There are 2 ways to break the array." Qin Fengzi didn't seem to mind his words. "One is to take it slow. Everything has a limit. I don't know what method he used or how he created this array. But I know that he can't absorb unlimited power. We have 30,000 soldiers. Attack slowly and don't let us suffer losses. He has accumulated his power to the limit, and either he counterattacks or the array will bite him. Either way we can block it. Using this method, we might be able to find a flaw in the battle that we haven't noticed yet. It's safer." Lord Vast Expanse was silent for a while. From start to finish, he was looking at Li Yunxin with narrowed eyes. Then he raised his hand and pointed into the distance. "Tell me, your people have been busy for so long, and that Li Yunxin is just standing on the rock, watching. Is he scared silly, or is he fearless and thinks that it's no big deal for you to find out?" Qin Fengzi also looked into the distance. The sun had just risen. Li Yunxin's silhouette was especially clear against the rising sun. He hadn't moved an inch since the beginning, but a small monster behind him was pacing back and forth in fear. Qin Fengzi thought for a while and said, "A person who can set up an array like this? I don't dare to speculate." "Lord Vast Expanse, I have something to say and I hope you won't blame me." Lord Vast Expanse curled his lips and said, "You will know if you blame me or not." Qin Fengzi said, "Even though I am a transcendent state cultivator, it's not because I wasn't diligent enough. It's because my ancestor said that I am talented in the art of arrays, so he told me to put more effort into it. I am no match for you and your generals in terms of cultivation level and immortal powers. But when it comes to arrays, I don't think I'm any weaker than anyone in the ocean." I've studied the array. I feel that this array is not something that can be created by a human. To put it bluntly, even if the old ancestor came personally with his divine power, he might not be able to do this. As he said this, Lord Vast Expanse finally turned around and looked at him. The generals around him were also surprised. These cultivators from the lifeless immortal sect also liked to play tricks. But everyone knew that to them, the ancestor in the Ruo River was a supreme existence that could not be blasphemed. Now that he had dragged the ancestor into this, he was probably telling the truth. He continued, but this kind of impossible array actually succeeded. I also heard that this array was created in one night. When the Allied army was chasing after the monster, this array didn't exist on the ocean. But after the Allied army retreated and after one night, it appeared out of nowhere. There must be something fishy here. Lord Vast Expanse frowned. What are you trying to say? Qin Fengzi sighed. I know that Lord Vast Expanse's bravery is unparalleled in the ocean. My first method is safe, but you might not like it. But I still want to advise you not to use the second method. Lord Vast Expanse snorted. You can't decide my business. Your first method is cowardly, I really don't like it. Tell me the second method. Qin Fengzi shook his head helplessly. The second method was already used by Taoist Master Zai, using force to break the array. He wanted to use Taoist Master Guangxing Profound's power to destroy this array. But he didn't expect that his power wasn't enough, and was used by Li Yunxin instead. And the 30,000 soldiers in my army are all elites. If I use this method of using force to break through technique, it might work. Lord Vast Expanse frowned. I thought you had some good ideas. After saying this, he let out a long breath and pointed to the surroundings. Look. Apart from our boundless sea army, who else is on the surface of the ocean? Qin Fengzi didn't need to look to know that there were other demons. When mortals looked at the ocean, they only felt that it was vast and desolate. But in reality the ocean was also bustling, just not as crowded as on land. Under the command of the Dragon Kings, there were demon warriors recruited from all over the sea and organized into soldiers and generals. There were also many that weren't organized, and they were taken under the command of the Monster Kings. These Monster Kings were like the tyrants on land. But they were much stronger than the tyrants. They also had their own private army. Only when the Dragon King and the tyrants ruled the ocean together could they ensure the peace of the sea. Now, outside the army of the Vast Expanse, many Monster Kings came after hearing the news, like a flock of vultures waiting to eat. Lord Vast Expanse knew where these people came from. Half of them were from the East Sea, some were from the Vast Expanse, and many were from the other seas. 1,000 years ago, Shinryu destroyed the cultivation of Goddess Penglai and the others, and promoted the current Dragon King, but it didn't leave behind no problems. Goddess Penglai and the others didn't belong to the demon race in the ocean. They were tyrannical rulers born out of nowhere. A unified rule needed to be dignified, mysterious, and unfathomable. But now that the Dragon King rose from the grass, how could the other Monster Kings not think of replacing him? Since the Monster Kings had such thoughts, many of them were always looking for opportunities. Lord Vast Expanse was also aware of this. As early as Lord Vast Expanse's army set off, he spread the news, attracting tyrants from all over. They said they wanted to show their support for the Vast Expanse, but in fact they were waiting to see a joke. If anything happened to his army, the joke of a sea of elites besieging a big demon on land being defeated would spread throughout the ocean. The prestige of the Vast Expanse would be swept away, and they would have to face many difficult challenges in the days to come. Lord Vast Expanse's move was vicious. The reason had been explained in the hall. The 8 Dragon Kings knew the inside story and how powerful Li Yunxin was. But in the eyes of the Monster Kings on the ocean, they were just an arrogant Lu Ku, with the cultivation of Shi mysterious state, who came to the ocean to make trouble by calling himself Dragon King. The 8 Dragon Kings said that all the elites of the 9 seas besieging Li Yunxin would be laughed at and looked down upon. But in fact, even if the elites of the Vast Expanse, known as the strongest in the 9 seas, came out, it was already incomprehensible and unbelievable. One sea against one person. Even if they won, it would be a great loss of face. Lord Vast Expanse snorted softly. These people are waiting to see me make a fool of myself. No, it's not just them. Lord Vast Expanse, wait and see, and so are the others. He sighed, leaned back on the throne and waved his hand. Let's do it your way first. At this point, do you want the Monster Kings to laugh at me for attacking one egg with one army? Catch him slowly. Put him. He turned his gaze to the immovable cube floating on the ocean in the distance. Seal him in that thing. Chapter 665. When the generals heard this, they were all shocked. Qin Fengzi suspected that he heard wrong. Lord is saying, slowly grind him down. That's more reliable. Lord Haohan became impatient. Let me take a good look at your lifeless immortal sect's abilities, don't disappoint me. Qin Fengzi heaved a sigh of relief. Understood. Then he soared into the clouds and headed towards the formation. When he arrived, a dozen lifeless immortal sect necromancers immediately surrounded him. They had a tacit understanding as if they had something to say. But Qin Fengzi remained calm and said, bring me forward. He turned and instructed the vanguard captain. The spiritual energy in front is chaotic. Wait here and don't disturb our formation. He was an elder of lifeless immortal sect. His words carried weight. The captain hesitated for a moment and didn't follow. The group continued forward. They only stopped when they reached the edge of Li Yunxin's formation. A necromancer lowered his voice and asked, Elder, how is it? Qin Fengzi smiled, it's done. Lord Haohan allowed us to take it slow. Another necromancer clapped, great. This way, all of Li Yunxin's treasures will belong to our lifeless immortal sect. We are going to establish a great achievement. Another necromancer whispered, Ancestor has mentioned that the land's Shen sect is evil. Sooner or later our lifeless immortal sect will return to the land and support the righteous path. A few days ago, we heard that all of Cloud Mountain's treasures were taken away and our heart ached. Now that this Li Yunxin has brought treasures to us, let's give his treasures to the elder ancestor. The day when our sect becomes righteous is just around the corner. Qin Fengzi listened to their chatter for a while before asking, did he reply? Not yet. The necromancer said, he is probably still hesitating. Qin Fengzi looked at Li Yunxin from afar, then let's just pretend and set up the formation first. Let's wait for him. In reality, when the necromancers were surveying and mapping, they had already used lifeless immortal sect's secret technique to send some information to Li Yunxin. The necromancers did have some tricks up their sleeves. When the message was sent, it resonated directly in Li Yunxin's mind. His previous thoughts were not wrong, this lifeless immortal gate was indeed unique. The message was divided into two parts. The first paragraph was, my lifeless immortal sect is independent in the sea and we have our own rules. After learning that Wei River Lord possessed a profound treasure, he planned to make a deal with him. Lord Vast Expanse had come with 30,000 troops and brought 10 formation-setting treasures with him. They were divided into front, middle, and rear armies. Each army set up the 5 elements formation according to the 5 elements. The eye of the formation is on the body of the leading general. You can rely on the Sheng, Du, Jing and Xiu gates to break it. The lifeless immortal sect was very generous. This part sold half of the vast army's secrets. However, Li Yunxin's expression did not change as he continued to stand against the wind. Perhaps his carefree attitude made the other party feel that the information they provided was far from satisfying his appetite. Soon after, the second message was sent. What we want is the Cloud Mountain magic treasure, but we only want half of it. Wei River Lord definitely has the Heaven's Heart technique that Dao Tong and Shen Gate have cultivated for 40,000 years, we only want a copy. The vast army's 5 elements formation will feint an attack. There is another soul-seizing formation under the water. If a soldier dies in battle, his soul will immediately be absorbed by the formation. Although because the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is in chaos, its power is less than 10%. But its power is still far greater than the formation made by the 300,000 lives of Wei City's people at Dongting Lake. Looks like the lifeless immortal sect wasn't just good people with no temper. Since they didn't get a reward when they sent out the second message, they vaguely displayed their power. Previously, Kuan Wuxi's group burned down Wei City and used the lives of hundreds of thousands of people to create a formation that could kill profound realm cultivators. In the end, Kuan Wuxi was schemed against by the Freemasons. He suffered the consequences. This matter was top secret, only a few people in the world knew about it. For the lifeless immortal sect to obtain such information and know the power of the formation, it could be seen that they were very powerful. If it was anyone else, they would have to think about it carefully. Li Yunxin was indeed thinking about it carefully. As he thought about it, he remembered that Qin Fengzi and Lord Haohan finished their conversation and rushed to the formation. He and Qin Fengzi stared at each other for a long time. Then he spat out one word, scram. This sound was extremely calm, but it shook the ocean surface like a clap of thunder. Everyone heard it clearly. Lord Haohan immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at the small figure far away. He laughed, is this a challenge? It's just a defeated dog barking. The demon general next to him said coldly, Very soon, he will know the power of our vast army. Vast Dragon King sneered, "Keep an eye on the Eastern Sea Dragon King. That trash is leading the army to cover their retreat, he might even let them come over. Once there's any movement, report to me immediately." The demon general cupped his fists. 15 scouts have already kept an eye on them. This sound also reached Qin Fengzi's ears. Unlike Lord Haohan, he knew what this meant. The other party refused to cooperate. Towards this reaction he was more shocked than angry. It shouldn't be like this. This Li Yunxin is currently in a very bad situation. And from the information they have, this person is a very scheming, unscrupulous person who is good at using all the conditions he can to turn the situation around. This kind of person, hearing these conditions at this time, how can he react like this? He was more like a righteous warrior who was tired of deceiving and scheming against each other, and just wanted to fight to his heart's content with his own strength. What a joke. Qin Fengzi frowned and stared at him, trying to guess what he was thinking. Before coming here he did have the thought of trying to communicate with him. At this point, if it was a normal demon he would probably give up on this thought. But now that he was standing at the edge of the formation that Li Yunxin set up, he could feel the terrifying power within. Just like he said to Lord Haohan before, this kind of formation isn't something that can be done by humans. Even a 10,000-year-old ancestor would find it hard to do. If he was a member of the vast army he would naturally try his best. But they are here to help. Just like Taoist Master Zai, they don't want to lose their lives here. Not to mention, for someone who is obsessed with formations, the secret of this formation really makes him curious. How did he do it? This formation is currently like a dormant beast. It's weak and listless, waiting for a powerful force to enter and activate it. If it's fully activated, what will it look like? Curiosity and desire for knowledge slowly calmed the anger in Qin Fengzi's heart. He tried to make one last attempt, risking using a secret technique to send a message to Li Yunxin. And so the voice in Li Yunxin's head sounded again. But this time, it wasn't the faint and unreal voice from before, but a much more approachable voice, Qin Fengzi's voice. If Taoist Master Zai has offended you before, Dragon King needs to know one thing: Taoist Master Zai is indeed a Taoist master, but he belongs to the sect of cultivators, while we belong to the sect of necromancers. We both have our own thoughts, and our standpoints are also slightly different. We don't advocate using violence to solve all problems, we focus more on exploring the unknown and the Taos. If Dragon King is wary, he thought his words were sincere and touching. But halfway through, Li Yunxin suddenly roared again, "Jabber jabber jabber, weird voice, don't stop." His voice was filled with incomprehensible anger and resentment, as if he was already on the edge of insanity and was finally ignited by a spark. "If you want to fight, then fight. Why are you cowering? Come. Let me see what this Lord Haohan is capable of. What can he do to me?" Qin Fengzi suddenly frowned. He didn't expect that although people had said that Li Yunxin's temperament was unreasonable, now he was unreasonable to this extent. Lord Haohan's expression turned cold. The demon general beside him saw his expression and immediately roared, "A grain of rice! You dare to compete with the sun and moon? Qin Fengzi, what are you waiting for?" Qin Fengzi's anger finally surged. Stubborn. He let out a long breath and shouted, "Get into formation. Show him whose boss is first." In an instant, the surface of the sea shone brightly. 64 pillars of light rose to the sky and converged at one point, creating a loud explosion. Mystic light surged between the pillars of light, instantly enveloping Li Yunxin and his formation. 2 yellow flags appeared in his hands. He first waved the flag on the left and shouted, "Wind and thunder of heaven and earth, heed my command." In an instant, the clear sky above the sea suddenly changed, and the leaden clouds pressed down heavily. Spirit energy was extracted by the formation from the chaotic spiritual energy of heaven and earth, gathering into the layer of golden light that enveloped Li Yunxin's formation. The golden light first turned white, then purple, and finally into a terrifying black. This strange color emitted a frightening aura of danger. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying power it would unleash once it was activated. It was like a fully drawn arrow, its sharp edge already aimed at Li Yunxin on top of the stone pillar. But at this moment, Wei River Dragon King suddenly charged into the sky, straight towards the point where the 64 pillars of light converged. Qin Fengzi and the necromancers were startled. Not panic but surprise. If Li Yunxin wanted to break this formation they thought he had a chance. Zai Zhenren once said that his formation was unique in defense. Thus, their first attack was only to test how far he could defend. who knew that Li Yunxin would give up his formation and charge forward with his body. Is this fighting head-on without a care for his life? The thought only flashed for a moment. The two collided. Like a prey pouncing towards an arrow, Wei River Dragon King suffered the full force of the formation in an instant. Terrifying tremors and loud noises spread out, even the clouds in the sky were dispersed by the shockwaves. The dozen or so necromancers in the formation all suffered the backlash of the formation. As the 64 pillars of light quickly dispersed, they felt irritated, annoyed and nauseous, almost vomiting blood. But what about Li Yunxin in the sky? Although he had revealed his powerful fiend god body, his entire body was shining with golden light. He was heavily injured in the first exchange of blows. Chapter 666. Lord Vast Expanse straightened his back on his throne and shouted, "Good!" When the vanguard soldiers saw that their lord was like this, their gongs and drums shook the heavens and they shouted loudly, their voices like thunder. Qin Fengzi frowned. What was this guy trying to do? Was he courting death? He had already set up his formation. He had broken through this one, but he still had a few more moves. Was he really going to take it head-on with his body? But he didn't have time to think too much. Li Yunxin's body paused in the air and then she pounced on them. It was as if she wanted to rush out of the 100-mile formation she had set up and kill them outside. He was really courting death. He subconsciously waved another flag in his hand. Stop him. 64 dazzling spots of light appeared in the air again, as if the sun had appeared on the surface of the sea. They only appeared for a moment, but they all shot out terrifying spiritual energy toward Li Yunxin, who was charging forward like a hurricane. The latter changed his form in the air and dodged dozens of attacks, but he was still hit by dozens of attacks. Another burst of light shot out, and he was blasted to the surface of the sea, but he had already reached the edge of the formation. Qin Fengzi sucked in a cold breath. There was information that indicated that the dragon son of the land had an extremely strong body, but no one expected it to be this strong. He was hit so many times but he didn't break into pieces. Seeing this, Lord Vast Expanse leaned forward slightly and raised his eyebrows. Ha! The vanguard troops surrounding Li Yunxin also shouted in unison. But the momentum was not as strong as before. They saw that Lord Wei River's momentum didn't decrease after taking 2 attacks, and they finally realized that he was coming for them. The captains in the army formation ran and shouted as they reorganized their formation, preparing to receive the oncoming attack. But on the vast ocean outside of Lord Vast Expanse's army, the demon kings and their subordinates who were watching the battle from afar cheered. These fellows' temperaments were similar to the tyrants of the land. Since he didn't take the Dragon King of the Nine Seas seriously and coveted his throne, he would naturally reward anyone who dared to challenge his authority, even if the reward wasn't for Li Yunxin, but purely to embarrass Lord Haohan. Stop him. Qin Fengzi finally opened his eyes wide. He thought that he knew what Li Yunxin was planning, to seize the commander of the 3 armies and seize the will of an ordinary man. He was fighting against an entire army alone and was already at a disadvantage in terms of momentum. He was clearly trying to build up his momentum by using such a barbaric method. This Li Yunxin was full of strange tricks. It was not because he didn't want to find another way, but because he didn't trust the people on his side. What he wanted to make use of were the tyrants on the surface of the ocean. Once he showed off his imposing manner and dealt a heavy blow to the boundless army, the monster kings on the surface of the ocean might not be content with their lot. Lord Boundless had to allocate more troops to prevent the monster kings from taking advantage of this opportunity to launch an attack. If he split his troops, wouldn't he have a chance of winning? If Jia Yuyong was able to hurt Lord Boundless, perhaps the monster king's subordinates would be of help to him instead. He originally planned to eat the rotten meat of the Wei River Dragon King, but he went to eat Lord Boundless instead. This person. He already knew that he was bold and willful, but he didn't expect him to be this bold. But wasn't it the most efficient way to fight against an entire army when he was in a disadvantageous situation? It was just that ordinary people didn't have the guts to do it. However, if he really broke through the formation that they had set up, then where would the face of the lifeless immortal sect be? Because of his shout, the necromancers also realized the seriousness of the situation. The formation that he had set up had changed from offense to defense. It was important to trap him. The mysterious light on the surface of the ocean shone crazily. For a moment, it was as if the light had turned into water and then into a boulder. But when Li Yunxin rushed to the edge of the formation, his palm flashed. Suddenly tens of thousands of ferocious beasts were released, and many strange monster soldiers appeared in the air. Seeing him use this move, Qin Fengzi finally heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that this was the method he used to deal with the small fries the day before. Among the strange beasts, there were those who fed on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and there were also those who had special abilities. And those monster soldiers that were formed by dots and lines were not afraid of sabers and axes, and when they made a scene, ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to stop them. Since he already knew this, he naturally prepared for it. When Li Yunxin used this move, he suddenly felt the pressure lessen. At least he had used one of his killing moves. As expected, this time, although the strange beasts and monster soldiers fiercely pounced on the immortal sex formation to bite and tear it apart, their success was limited. The momentum was shocking, but it only tore a small hole in the formation in an instant. But in the end it still couldn't completely stop them. Li Yunxin killed his way out of the hole, and the hole immediately closed, trapping the tens of thousands of ferocious beasts inside. But even so, as soon as this Wei River Dragon King escaped, he immediately revealed his huge Shinryu body. Golden horn, black armor, wind, cloud. He opened his huge mouth and spat out a few hundred feet of lightning, shooting straight at the two necromancers who were closest to him. Those necromancers were proficient in formations, but how could they withstand a thunderous attack from a profound realm great demon? Even turn into charcoal was a piece of cake. He was directly turned into ashes. Seeing this, Qin Fengzi's expression darkened. Although shocked, he didn't panic. He then waved the two flags in his hands and shouted, "It's done, retreat." They originally wanted to test the waters. But Li Yunxin used his physical body to break through the test. Then they wanted to heavily injure him. But Li Yunxin wanted to kill his way out of the formation. So they wanted to trap him inside the formation. But now, Li Yunxin had come out of the formation. Although every step was blocked by Li Yunxin, Qin Fengzi knew that the battlefield was unpredictable. It wasn't like playing on a chessboard, where everything could be done according to one's will. Although the situation was out of his expectations, they had already achieved enough results. Not only did he severely injure the tyrannical and bold Wei River Dragon King, but he also trapped one of his trump cards in the formation. Now they only managed to release his heavily injured body. This was already a happy result. Even the Purple Knight spiritual master couldn't do this. But after this, they knew that this Li Yunxin was really hard to predict and extremely difficult to deal with. The necromancers quickly retreated. How could the vanguard retreat? They were originally here to protect the necromancers and set up the formation, and were tens of miles away from the vast army. If they retreated, they would definitely be killed before the battle. Thus, they raised the gongs and drums again and charged forward bravely. Unfortunately, their bravery wasn't enough. When Li Yunxin suddenly charged towards Qin Fengzi from the west, there were only a few hundred people in front of him. How could the demon soldiers defend against this mysterious chi-kissing dragon body? Even if it was a formation that had been practiced for years, it was like a piece of paper. He swung his head and tail, lightning flashed under his ribs, and in the blink of an eye, he killed all the vanguard troops and blood dyed the sea red. When the demon monarchs on the ocean saw his heroic appearance, they immediately let out another round of thunderous cheers. When Lord Haohan saw this, he finally laughed coldly. Good, good, good. This land bastard has some guts. The vanguard troops, press forward. Don't let him run back. Let him see whose army's morale is higher. The demon generals beside him had long wanted to fight. But their lord listened to the necromancers and wanted to plan slowly. When they saw Li Yunxin suddenly rush out and bully the weak vanguard troops, they were already gritting their teeth. They knew that this guy planned to kill outside the formation and then immediately escape, hoping to win. Their vast army was the strongest on the ocean. How could they endure such humiliation, letting him kill people and then retreat back into the formation? They had long been eager to fight. Now that they received the order, the sound of gongs and drums was immediately heard. The 4,000 vanguard troops moved forward, and they must trap Li Yunxin before he escaped. However, when the entire army advanced 10 miles, they realized that things didn't seem to be as they thought. The chi-kissing dragon body didn't turn around and retreat. Instead, it pounced on them again. How dare you? Lord Haohan finally stood up from his throne. His blood vessels expanded, and even his hair fluttered. Since he led the army to eliminate a rebellious demon in the country 300 years ago, how long has it been since he saw such a brave and fierce outlaw? He really killed an entire army by himself. Such a scene not only surprised the demon kings on the ocean and made them dumbfounded, but it also made Lord Haohan raise his spirits and realize, there was really a good battle to fight today. Awesome. In an instant, The chi-kissing dragon body that carried the wind and thunder collided with the vanguard troops. A terrible strong light and sound burst out. The entire surface of the sea was shaking violently. The 4,000 vanguard troops, even in a neat formation, occupied a large area of the ocean, and one couldn't see the end of it. But Li Yunxin's real body was 1,000 feet long, and when he entered the formation he was still a giant, like a fierce tiger rushing into a flock of sheep. Not only did he carry the wind and thunder, but he also released numerous mystical artifacts to protect himself during the battle. Whether it was Lord Hauhan or the demons on the ocean, they couldn't see the battle clearly. Mystic lights, hurricanes, and giant waves covered everything. They only knew that the terrifying power and momentum that could destroy heaven and earth burst out, stirring up a giant whirlpool on the ocean surface. In the whirlpool, fresh blood and golden blood splattered everywhere, and screams and loud noises filled the air. Seeing this, the demon generals around Lord Hauhan all changed their expressions. They had never seen who could fight against such a huge army and end up in such a situation. Qin Fengzi and the necromancers had already retreated to the center of the army. But at this moment they widened their eyes. After observing for a while, they couldn't help but sigh, "What a pity, what a pity, what a pity." What he felt pity was not for Li Yunxin, nor for the lives of the soldiers, but for the mystical artifacts. Any one of the Dharma treasures that Li Yunxin had unleashed was powerful enough to easily annihilate hundreds or even thousands of low-tier fiendish demons in a single exchange. But just like how 1,000 armed farmers couldn't be a match for 100 well-trained elite soldiers, 4,000 battle-hardened demon soldiers working together, and with the help of the formation, their power would increase by more than 10 times, or even 100 times? It was true that Li Yunxin's magical treasures could kill countless people, but they were like the most fragile consumables, being destroyed one by one. If these treasures fell into the hands of the lifeless immortal sect, how useful would they be? If this Li Yunxin also died in the chaos, how much effort would they have to spend to search for the cultivation techniques of the mystical sects on the continent? Chapter 667. He sighed 3 times in a row and made up his mind to discuss this matter with Lord Vast Expanse. At least he had spared Li Yunxin's life so that he would have a chance to get what the celestial sect wanted from him. But just as he thought of this, the light at the point of contact suddenly paused, and then disappeared. That space disappeared into thin air. At least when looking at it horizontally, it disappeared. The concept of height was completely erased. The sea turned into an extremely blurry picture. At the point where that space and normal space met, time and space were distorted as if a god had pulled it hard. The broken limbs of the dead demon soldiers were twisted into strange curves, but they weren't broken. The light was still dazzling, but it couldn't be seen, only felt. This was an indescribable feeling. Qin Fengzi knew that Li Yunxin had used his other trump card, the move he used to kill the Purple Knight Enlightened. "I want this strange formation too," he screamed madly in his heart. This Li Yunxin, just how many treasures does he have? But that Li Yunxin had actually brought out all of her family's wealth? Does he want to die? Qin Fengzi thought that Li Yunxin wanted to ambush the commander of the Central Army and cause a great change in the situation on the sea. Lord Vast Expanse and his subordinates thought that Li Yunxin wanted to break out of his formation and eat the meat of the vanguard army, so that he could destroy the prestige of the Vast Expanse army. But now that he saw this move, he finally realized that he was wrong. He had used all his strength. Even if he could retreat, he was already seriously injured and his trump card had been seen. How could he have any strength left? It was at this moment that the space distorted by Li Yunxin shattered with a rumble. Fragments flew everywhere, just like when the Purple Knight Enlightened was seriously injured, and the sea instantly boiled. The 4,000 vanguard army, all gone. There was dead silence in the Central Army. Many demon generals turned green. But Lord Vast Expanse's eyes widened, and he took another step forward from his throne. "What a great Li Yunxin!" he roared, shaking the sea. "I'll leave your corpse intact and give you a grand burial." However, right in the middle of the shattered space, Wei River Dragon King, who had regained his human form due to the casting of the spell formation, was covered in blood and wounds. Without stopping, he pounced over again and shouted angrily, "Leave your corpse intact. Die." When he fought with the Purple Knight Taoist, there were only 2 of them. However, there were still the middle and rear armies of the vast army dozens of miles away. The broken pieces flew in all directions. Of course, there was no reason to avoid that piece. A single fragment formed a terrifying whirlpool. Dozens of fragments shot out at the same time, immediately sucking in a few hundred more demon soldiers in the middle of the army, creating a bloody path for him. By this time the shouts of the magnates on the surface of the ocean had almost drowned out the roar of the boiling ocean. He alone had finally taken away the courage of the vast army. Every demon soldier clenched their teeth and only knew how to hold the weapons in their hands tightly as a fear that they had not felt for a long time arose in their hearts. This way River Dragon King was so powerful. However, after hearing his arrogant words, the vast Dragon King was not angry. Instead, his eyes shone brightly. He took another step forward and laughed loudly. "Ah! How dare you! How dare you! My great head is here if the way River Lord wants to, take it yourself." Then he suddenly restrained his expression. Middle army, press forward. Anyone, even the demon soldier with the lowest cultivation base, could see that this brave and unparalleled Li Yunxin was already an arrow at the end of its flight. When a great demon suffered a serious injury, he naturally had a way to heal his own wound. Not only to not let others see him in a sorry state, but also to stop the bleeding. Stopping the bleeding was important to mortals, but it was also important to the demons. The essence blood in their bodies poured out, and their demon power quickly weakened, similar to how mortals lost too much blood. However, Li Yunxin's body was now covered with wounds, and the golden blood all over his body was like a small stream that sprinkled down. How long could this kind of injury last? It was also because of this that the vast army could suppress the fear in their hearts, pull themselves together and charge forward. Lord Haohan's throne also moved forward with the middle army. This Dragon King of the Sea saw that Li Yunxin had transformed into a set of treasured armor and a godly sword. He charged into the formation as if there was no one there, and attacked with great ease. He didn't seek to protect himself, only to kill the enemy. With one move he set off a wave of blood and no one was a match for his sword. But he didn't make a move. He stood quietly on his throne, looking straight at Li Yunxin's fierce momentum. Although there were profound realm experts among the demon generals under his command, facing Li Yunxin who was like a mad tiger, and his lord was at the front lines, how could they go forward? Naturally they had to protect Lord Haohan so that he wouldn't make any mistakes. Although the remaining true realm demons were generals, they weren't dragons after all. They weren't like Li Yunxin who had been through many dangerous situations. Once Li Yunxin charged into the middle army's formation, he would only charge toward the place where Lord Haohan's banners were the densest. Once a demon like him was in the formation, once he focused on killing in one place and transformed into his human form, it didn't matter how many people there were. The Sea Demon Army relied on their daily training and formations that worked well together. If they encountered a strong enemy, they would use formations from afar and surround them. But now the formations couldn't be used, they couldn't hit him. Even if they surrounded him, they couldn't stop him. It was this rare situation that caused him to be seriously injured several times. He killed his way to a place 30 steps away from Lord Haohan. Lord Haohan's throne was more like a big bed. The throne was carried by 16 strong men, surrounded by strong bodyguards, and stood on a jade platform that was condensed from magical power. When Li Yunxin killed his way here, half of his armor had been broken. Only the sword in his hand was still shining brightly, and the blood couldn't cover its sharpness. But he was already panting like an ox. He could only use the sword to support himself so that he wouldn't fall. Although he stood still and glared at Lord Haohan, the demon soldiers surrounding him were scared out of their wits. They only dared to surround him from afar and no one dared to get close to him. The two profound realm demon generals beside Lord Haohan sneered, cupped their hands and shouted in a deep voice, "We're willing to take Swan's head for you, my lord." But Lord Haohan stared at Li Yunxin for a while and shook his head. "You don't deserve to take the head of such a person." The demon general's expression froze, and he put his hand down in embarrassment. The vast Dragon King was silent for a while. He looked at every wound on Li Yunxin's body that was so deep that the bones could be seen, and sighed. "Ever since I took control of the vast realm, I've quelled countless rebellions and killed millions. You're the first to kill in front of my imperial palace." He put his hands behind his back, and took 2 steps forward from his throne. The surrounding generals were all shocked and shouted, "No!" But Lord Haohan ignored them. He looked at Li Yunxin and slowly walked in front of him. "What do you have to say?" Li Yunxin let out a long breath, and blood flowed out of his tightly closed mouth. After another 3 or 4 breaths, he suddenly looked up to the sky and roared angrily, "Oh!" This roar was extremely sorrowful. Although it was like thunder that shook the entire ocean, it also had an endless sense of desolation and exhaustion, like the long howl of a lone wolf on the verge of death. As he howled, the blood in his mouth sprayed all over the vast Dragon King's body. But this ruler of the vast realm's expression didn't change, and he didn't even try to dodge. He only waited until he shouted himself hoarse and lowered his head, and then slowly wiped his face. He took 3 steps back and stared at him. "So you're a sad person. You want to die?" "Mph." He shook his head and paused. "Warriors can die in battle, but not like this. Go back. When you really have the will to fight, I'll personally be your opponent." After saying this, he turned around and strode back to the palanquin. "There's also such a person on land. All troops retreat 100 miles. Send orders to all the demons on the ocean. If anyone dares to kill the person I want to kill, it's the same as treason." About 4 hours later, the ocean finally calmed down. Li Yunxin stood alone on the surface of the ocean. The blood on the treasured sword in his hand had already dried up. But since it was a treasured sword, it naturally wouldn't be tainted. Now that the blood was gone, it shone brightly under the blazing sun. The vast realm army retreated 100 miles, and the demons watching the battle retreated even further. The surface of the ocean was as calm as before, as if the previous battle was just an illusion, and in reality, the troops of all sides hadn't moved. At this time he slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Then he raised his head, not looking in the direction of the vast realm army, but to the east. There was a blue sky and white clouds, a yellowed ocean surface, and the indistinct shadows of demons on the ocean surface. But other than that there was nothing. Li Yunxin was silent for a while. He raised his hand and threw the treasured sword in his hand into the ocean. Then he turned around and returned to his 100-mile-large formation. The formation set up by the lifeless immortal sect to trap his demon beasts and demon soldiers had become useless after being continuously attacked. He effortlessly broke it, took out the scroll and retrieved the beasts and soldiers. Then he turned into a golden light and landed on the stone pillar. First, he shook off the broken treasured armor, and then created a set of clothes for himself. After doing all this, he didn't adjust his breathing to heal his injuries. Instead, he slowly walked on the pillar and drew with his sword fingers. The formation he carved on the stone pillar was slightly damaged due to the impact of the lifeless immortal sect's formation, and he was now repairing it. The small kernel was still on the pillar. Actually, just now was the perfect opportunity for him to escape, but the formation was surrounded, and there were demons released by Li Yunxin in the ocean, so he didn't manage to escape. From the moment he saw Li Yunxin land on the ground, he maintained a dumbfounded state and stared at him without blinking. After staring for a full 15 minutes, he seemed to come back to his senses. Dragon King, you, what kind of battle technique is this?" Li Yunxin ignored him. The small colonel suddenly cried, "Dragon King is merciful. Dragon King is brave. Dragon King, if you really want to die, let me live first. I will be a cow or a horse in my next life to repay Dragon King's kindness." "I have." Li Yunxin stopped in his tracks. He stared at him for a while. There were still wounds on his face and he looked very ferocious. Even though his gaze was calm, it was enough to make the small colonel stop crying and swallow his next words. After 3 or 4 breaths of time, Li Yunxin turned around and started walking again. "Who said I'm going to die?" he said in a low voice. "Forget it. So what if I die?" After a moment of silence, he sighed. "Live." Chapter 668. The vast army retreated 100 miles away, but that didn't mean they were retreating. They only watched from afar and rested for the time being. When the time came, they would send out their troops. The demon generals were indignant, but they didn't dare to show it in front of Lord Vast Expanse. He could only stand by his side with an ashen face, watching his lord sit on the throne, his body slightly leaning forward as he stared unblinkingly at Li Yunxin, who was even further away. At such a distance, only profound realm cultivators could barely see Li Yunxin's movements. And that was when the other party didn't intentionally interfere. But the vanguard and vanguard were all killed by one person. It was the greatest humiliation the vast army had ever experienced in 1,000 years. Not all the demon generals could understand their lord's actions. They thought that even if their lord didn't kill him because he cherished talent, he should have captured him and slowly thought about the future. But now, after making such a huge sacrifice, they actually let him go. Didn't that person die in vain? These doubts and dissatisfaction didn't only exist in the hearts of the demon generals. The necromancers of the lifeless immortal sect also thought the same. Their sacrifices couldn't compare to the soldiers of the vast army, but in the hearts of the necromancers, the life of one of them was more precious than 100 demon soldiers. Now, the necromancers were in the middle of the army, surrounding Qin Fengzi. After a long silence, someone finally whispered, "The two of them died just like that." After saying that, he looked at his peers. He couldn't help but ask, "Your Honor, why did Lord Vast Expanse?" Qin Fengzi looked in Lord Vast Expanse's direction, then looked around. The demons watching the battle didn't retreat, and their numbers seemed to have increased. It was as if the previous battle had made them more interested and curious about the outcome of this battle. He understood a little, then shook his head. "I always tell you to think more before doing things. You have to see the inside story. This is a good opportunity. Think about it carefully." The necromancers were confused, then fell silent. But the necromancer who asked before thought for a while, then blinked. "Your Honor is saying that there's an inside story?" "In my opinion there is." Qin Fengzi nodded, then squinted his eyes and looked in Li Yunxin's direction. But at such a distance he couldn't see anything. "We know a little about Li Yunxin." He retracted his gaze. "I've told you about what he did on land. That's why we tried to communicate with him first. We don't want to be enemies with this person unless it's absolutely necessary. You have escaped from death time and time again. You are extremely scheming and come up with many strange plans. All of you usually think highly of yourselves, but think about whether you can reach his level." The necromancers were indignant. It was naturally uncomfortable for them to think about the enemy who had just killed two of their fellow disciples. But no one spoke. Even if he was indignant, he had to admit defeat. The most terrifying thing about this person is that he dares to take risks. He dared to risk his own life. He had died once in the city of Wei and again in Yunshan. However, in the end they all survived. Now think about what he did in the past and look at the present. Qin Fengzi sighed. He has a formation but he doesn't defend it. After revealing an opening, he charged over like a brainless warrior. It's not incomprehensible for a normal person to do so. He's already at death's door. But he was originally waiting here. He wouldn't not know that an army was coming, so he must have some strange plan. I don't believe that such a person came to seek death. He must have done this as part of a plan. And it might not be his true body that came. He is at the Shi mysterious state and has the ability to turn his soul into a real body. His formation I was less than 100 miles away from the center of the army. It's very likely that he sent an avatar for us to kill. It's fine if it's someone else. Against someone like him, would you dare to kill him if he was sent to you? The necromancers looked at each other. The person who spoke before moved his mouth as if he wanted to refute. But he couldn't find anything to say. He could only say, "Then Lord Haohan? If I can think of this, how can Lord Haohan not think of it?" Qin Fengzi shook his head. He has led the vast sea for 1,000 years. He isn't as bold as others think. Other than the unlucky Lord of West Sea, none of the dragon kings on the sea are easy to deal with. Qin Fengzi looked in Lord Haohan's direction. He hesitated for a while and said, "He must have other considerations. Mulian, tell us." The person he called Mulian was the necromancer, Taoist Mulian, who had spoken before. Being called out, he looked a little flattered. He didn't dare to be careless. He held his breath and frowned, thinking for a while. Then he looked at the demons around him. Suddenly his eyes lit up. "Lord, are you saying, the people in the vast army all look indignant? Clearly they view the battle just now as a great humiliation. Previously, the reason why His Honor persuaded Lord Haohan to let us make the first move was also because Lord Haohan felt that even if we won, we would still be ridiculed by these demon kings. But Li Yunxin charged in himself just now. Not only did the front line not stop him, but he also rushed to the front of the carriage. Now that this happened, no matter what we do, it will be a joke. If Lord Haohan thinks the same as Lord Haohan and thinks that this is Li Yunxin's clone that came to him on purpose to kill him and lure him into a trap, why don't we pretend that we appreciate each other? Even though we can't save our face, we can at least gain a good reputation for appreciating talent." Qin Fengzi smiled. "I think so too. Sai, it's a pity. I want to see what kind of shocking move Li Yunxin will make if Lord Haohan really fell for the trap and killed him." The vast army rested for about a day. During this time, they sent 15 scouts to report the movements of the East Sea Army. After reading about 40 rounds of urgent military reports, Lord Haohan furrowed his brows. Something didn't seem right. They had sent their troops 2 days ago. He went to Li Yunxin and Lord Haohan went to the west. Because it was said that the red-clothed witch, Red Lady, had also gone there. It seemed that she had been entrusted by Li Yunxin. that which was at the peak of the profound realm. If she had met up with Li Yunxin, he wouldn't have been able to kill them one day ago. But he had actually sent away such a great helper. Qin Fengzi thought he had guessed Lord Haohan's intention correctly, but he had missed one point. Li Yunxin's unusual behavior meant that he was very confident in this place. Because of these factors, Lord Haohan couldn't kill him easily. According to the military report, the East Sea Army had rushed to the west in the first half of the day, and it seemed that they really wanted to stop Red Lady. However, half a day ago, after the battle with Li Yunxin, the East Sea Army suddenly stopped at the bottom of the sea. They stopped for a day and a half. By the time Lord Haohan saw the military report, they still hadn't broken camp. In the worst-case scenario, like what the generals around Lord Haohan said, Lord Haohan didn't want to help. Instead, he had to wait for Red Lady to come to Li Yunxin's rescue, and the East Sea Army would be attacked from two sides. But the Dragon King had a different opinion. Although he and Lord Haohan didn't get along, he knew that Lord Haohan wasn't a fool. With such an obvious attitude, even if his vast army was removed, there were still the remaining Dragon Kings of the Six Seas. If the 6 Dragon Kings knew what he had done, how could they let him live? Even if they didn't attack him together, they would scatter and let the East Sea be turned upside down by Li Yunxin and that witch. So, what was the reason? The Dragon King pondered for nearly 4 hours before he got another report. It was said that a day and a half ago, someone rushed from Penglai and caught up with the East Sea Army. Only then did the Dragon King of the East Sea stop. The person's cultivation level was so high that the scouts couldn't see through it. Lord Haohan realized that the person might be the counselor that Lord Haohan had hidden. The counselor from the land, who was said to have a profound cultivation level in mind. Did something big happen for him to suddenly chase after them? In fact, the Dragon King was only half right. Lord Haohan, who he couldn't figure out, was also in a terrible situation. East Sea had sent 25,000 troops, and now the army was stationed in the Sea Tiger Gorge. The Sea Tiger Gorge was similar to the garrison fortress of the dynasty on land. Usually there were only a few soldiers stationed there. In times of war, it could be used as a temporary resting place for the army and a supply point for the rear. The Sea Tiger Gorge was wide but not deep. It was more like an elongated basin. Lord Haohan's tent was in the middle of the gorge, surrounded by elite soldiers. Scouts and sentries were sent out all over the sea, as if they were facing a formidable enemy, or as if the army had some secret they didn't want others to know. In fact, what they didn't want others to know was Lord Haohan's current appearance. Inside the anti-crystal light shield of the central military tent, he had a bitter face and cupped his hands. He leaned forward slightly, like a child who had made a mistake and was being scolded by his teacher. And opposite him, it was Lady Mingyue Shangguanyu. The ground was a mess. Cups, documents, armors and weapons all rolled on the ground. The cups and documents were torn to pieces, and the armors and weapons were broken. Although the sea was not good at smelting, there were still energy practitioners. Lord Haohan was the lord of Penglai and East Sea. Although he didn't have as many treasures as a nouveau riche like Li Yunxin, he was not inferior in quality. But now, the weapons and armors that he had always regarded as treasures and cleaned by himself every day were destroyed, but he couldn't even vent his anger. You trapped me in East Sea. You trapped me here. Shangguanyu bit her lips and looked at him, her eyes red. Because she was still young and beautiful, she looked like a sad beautiful girl. What did you say to me when I first came to Penglai? Zhao Zhijing, what did you say to me? What did you promise me? Lord Haohan raised his hand to wipe his forehead, lowered his body and murmured. Yes. Yes. What is it? Shangguanyu grabbed a copper paperweight on the table beside her and threw it on his forehead. With a bang, a corner of the copper paperweight was flattened, but there was not even a mark on Lord Haohan's forehead. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.